Welcome to Talkshoe, everybody. Chris Ransom of Draft Utopia here, back for another episode, and this will be our second episode on YouTube, the second full episode on the YouTube channel. And this week we've got Joseph Potter and Andrew Kermish of Draft Evolution. We're going to be previewing the AFC and NFC East divisions, and then I'll talk about my projected playoff teams for both the conferences, and then at the end, if we still have time before Joey has to go into work, we'll break down a few teams in depth in the 3-round mock draft Tony Mario posted yesterday. So I'll list some of the teams and we'll go through what grades those teams would get if they drafted those players. So we'll do that at the end if we have time, because next week will be our first mock draft show, and I know that as exciting as that is, we have to focus on the final 8 teams to preview this week. So let's start off with the same team we opened up last week's show with, the Buffalo Bills. There are reports, rumors, that they're going to trade Tyrod Taylor, LaShawn McCoy for even more picks. I think it's clickbait personally. I don't trust this source at all. It was like 90p or some site that reported this, so I don't trust that where intel they're getting. I know Evan Silvio or something, I can't remember his name. He's a big shot media reporter. He said that the Bills are exploring the possibility of trading both McCoy and Taylor. I'm not buying it at all, and this team does have good offensive tackles. They can run the football effectively. The defense is pretty solid. The secondary is a huge weakness now that they've traded Ronald Darby. They moved on from Gilmore, and they're going to expect a lot from White and Seymour. And I like White. I think he can be successful in Buffalo. At the same time, though, I don't feel that way about Seymour. So they're going to rely heavily on their front seven. And to top that off, Marcel Darius has been injured and has missed a lot of preseason and training camp so far. If he can get healthy, that's going to help Buffalo a lot. But at the same time, if he's not healthy, that's going to put Buffalo in a very difficult situation, because they get a home game against the Jets in week 1, and then they go to Carolina in week 2. I think that is winnable, and I could see Buffalo winning that just so McDermott can say, yeah, I beat my predecessor. Let's move on. And then Buffalo hosts Denver week 3, and then Atlanta week 4, and then their schedule goes from hectic to hell from that point forward. So the Buffalo Bills are a team that has some pieces in place. And at one point, I did have this team starting 6-0, only to finish 9-7 and miss the playoffs. But they traded Sammy Watkins. They have a lot more holes on their team than most realize. And I think that in itself is going to make this a learning experience for the Bills this season. But I'm going to say they go 7-9 and finish second in the AFC East division. Joey, Kerm, what are your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills?
Well, I'm actually watching, as we speak, Nathan Peterman's highlight against the Eagles, and what I'm finding right now is that even though Peterman's not going against the first, he looks pretty good right now. He has a good high hold on the ball, does good footwork, throws the back shoulder well, leads his receivers well. There's a sophomore. Just watched him on his sideline back shoulder throw here in the late second quarter, and beautiful throw right between 2 defenders. To Jones, the only where the receiver can get it, between 2 defenders. Excellent pass. He leads his receivers extremely well. Not afraid to use the check down. So in this case, if Peterman looks better this week than he did last, keep going with how he's doing, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills wouldn't say, all right, let's see what, at least feel out what we could get for Tyrod Taylor. Because right now, Peterman is looking like a guy who's the best quarterback on that roster at the start of the season.
That's a valid point. I sort of feel that way about Mahomes as well, but they're going to let him develop, and we'll try to stay on topic with the Buffalo Bills here. But, Kerm, what are your thoughts on this Buffalo Bills team this season? What record do you think they'll end up with? Interesting. And the team that I have at 6-10, who I have finishing third in the division behind the Buffalo Bills, I'm going to guess you have them finishing second, Kerm, and that's the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to guess that Kerm has the Dolphins in second, but the reason I'm down on them is because the Ryan Tannehill injury hurts them. Raquan McMillan got a season-ending injury. That's another thing that could hurt the Miami Dolphins. You also have Tony Lippett on injured reserve as well. Koamisi retired after a season-ending injury, another one. So the Miami Dolphins, they lost Jelani Jenkins, but they got Kiko Alonso. They moved in the weak side. They've got Timmons at the mic. But not having Raquan McMillan, that sort of makes their run defense a little bit more suspect than initially anticipated. So Miami's got good offensive tackles. They've got an effective center in Mike Pouncey when healthy, but their guard situation is one of the worst in the NFL. And now you have Jay Cutler, fresh out of Chicago, straight out of Chicago, straight out of the Windy City here in Miami. He sought out quarterback advice from Dan Marino. This is an interesting scenario, but I just don't trust Cutler. He's only had one season with less than 10 interceptions, and that year he suffered a season-ending injury. He put together his best season under Adam Gase 2 years ago. I'm not saying they can't win 6 or 7 games. They're perfectly capable of that, but with this schedule, with the NFC South teams, with the AFC West teams, and the AFC East having to play the Patriots twice, it doesn't bode well for them. So I'm going to say they go 6-10 and finish third in the AFC East division. Joey, what are your thoughts on the Jay Cutler situation and just the overall dynamic with Tunsil at left tackle, James at right tackle? What are your thoughts on this situation for Jay Cutler? It's better than the situation he was in Chicago.
Yeah, Jay Cutler was in a bad situation for a few years. Tried to do too much. Because the old gunslinger mentality. Same thing Brett Favre had. The only difference is Brett Favre was the fun-loving guy, Jay Cutler is the abrasive guy. So Jay Cutler gets more heat than Brett Favre ever did. Brett Favre had more talent around him. So there are some things I saw that receivers would bail Brett Favre out on. Receivers weren't bailing him. Unless it was Brandon Marshall, receivers weren't bailing out Jay Cutler. There's not a lot of difference in gameplay between the two of them. So, I think that Cutler is the type of player that is going to come in here, knows the offense. I think he's got a better supporting cast than he ever did in Chicago. So, he's going to have a better supporting cast. He's going to have a better season than he's had in recent years. That being said, he doesn't have the Brett Favre type cast. So I don't think he'll have a season any longer for the rest of these games.
That's a good...
I can have a great season. I've long said that Cutler is like a modern-day Brett Favre clone in how he throws the ball. With the old gunslinger mentality. And I think we're going to see that here this year. Only Cutler's going to have better pieces, and he's going to end up playing better because of it.
When you think about it, this is actually Jay Cutler's best team since he was on the Denver Broncos. And back then he had Brandon Marshall, a young Brandon Marshall, before he became the big-time superstar that he is. He had a promising, yet unheralded, I don't know if unheralded is the right word, but a promising yet raw Eddie Royal, who went on to fizzle a few years after that. And then he had Ryan Clady as his left tackle, as well as a decent running game in Denver. So he had a lot to work with under Josh McDaniels in Denver, but then the whole Cutler-McDaniels feud kind of forced Cutler to seek out a trade. And that really ended up being the best thing that could happen for the Denver Broncos. Sure, they had to go through 2.5 years of Tim Tebow, but they did get Peyton Manning in the sweepstakes through free agency. They built the defense up through the draft, and they were able to win Super Bowl 50 as a result. So if you think about it, the Jay Cutler trade may have been the best thing that ever happened at the Denver Broncos. But in all seriousness, with as far as Miami goes, I think this is his best situation to succeed since Denver. And you mentioned how Jay Cutler is not like Brett Favre. Brett Favre wears Wrangler jeans and plays football or ultimate frisbee with his golden retriever or his dog in the Wrangler commercials. Maybe it's not his dog, but the Wrangler dog. I want some clarification on that. And with Jay Cutler, there's just memes about him smoking cigarettes. It's just kind of sad. It's like Cutler's like the camel guy from the Camel commercials, and Brett Favre is just that fun-loving, happy guy, like you stated, Joey. So, yeah. Yeah, I just compared Jay Cutler to the cigarette camel, so I apologize for that. Andrew Kermish, what are your thoughts on this Dolphins team?
I think the Pharisees stay behind the Patriots, and they, like Jody said, Cutler could be like the Favre, except for where Favre is, they outgoing and it's good for sponsorship. And it's good spokesman. Cutler's not that person, but the mechanics or the same. I never thought about that because I thought him and Brandon Marshall could do a lot of good together, but their personalities don't mesh well enough. That could be why him and Brandon Marshall never really did a whole lot together as far as on the field.
That's a valid point, Kerm. And you look at this Miami offense, Jay Ajayi, the offensive tackle situation stable with Laramie Tunsil and Juwan James. You got Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker. You still have Kenny Stills in the slot. He's moving from a number 2 role to a slot role. And the Dolphins have some good depth players like Jakeem Grant, Leonte Carew from last year's draft that are familiar with the playbook, who have learned the system. So they're a lot deeper at wide receiver than most people realize. Plus, they got Julius Thomas in the Jaguars trade, and they brought back Anthony Fasano as a blocking tight end. So the Miami Dolphins have more weapons to work with than most people realize. So that's one thing that actually works in Jay Cutler's favor. Sure, he did have good weapons in Chicago, but he didn't have this amount of depth. Even in Denver, he didn't have this much depth at wide receiver. And that's one thing that bodes very well for Jay Cutler, Joey. Yeah, I'm here. I was talking about Miami's supporting cast and how Cutler has more depth in Miami than he did in Chicago or Denver with Parker, Jarvis Landry, Leonte Carew, Kenny Stills, Jakeem Grant, the two tight ends, and Thomas and Fasano. Would you agree with that or no?
I would agree, yeah, I knew what you were talking about. It sounded like you guys just went mute there for a while.
Well, we were waiting for you to reply to the question, but it's all good. Curb, how many wins do you think the Dolphins...
You what now?
As far as Miami goes defensively, you are looking at a team that has Cameron Wake back, but he's getting older. You also have Charles Harris fighting for a starting job. If Miami starts Andre Branch or William Hayes, that's not going to make their pass rushes effective. I love their defensive tackle depth with Ndamukong Suh, Jordan Thomas, and then the two rookies they drafted, Vincent Taylor and Devon Godchaux out of LSU. They're stacked at that position. They're not as deep at linebacker as I thought they'd be because McMillan got injured. They still lack a number 1 corner. They still lack a free safety, but Rashad Jones is back from his season-ending injury last year, and Miami's going to need Rashad Jones to step up and get some turnovers, get some hard hits, get 100 tackles again, because he's going to be the X factor of this secondary that looks very suspect on paper right now. I know they have Byron Maxwell and Xavier Howard, but I see both of them as number 2 corners at the moment. They need a number 1 corner, so we'll see what happens, but Miami, I have them at 6-10. I'm guessing Kerm has them at 7-9 since he had Buffalo at 6-10. I don't think he'd be crazy enough to put the Jets in second place. So, what do you think, Kerm?
No, I got the Jets in last.
I figured as much.
Figured nothing.
Everybody has the Jets in last place. I mean, every writer at Draft Utopia, myself, Tony Mario, Mark Suba, Ryan Romero, every one of them has the Jets picking at number 1 in our NFL mock draft, which we will get to in a little bit later. And I'll tell you why this team has so many holes in a bit. But Miami, Kerm probably has them at 7-9 or 8-8. We'll get to the next team, the team that I spent an entire tangent talking about on the Evolution Network a few weeks ago, the New England Patriots. And yes, I do think this is a team to beat this year. I'm not going to go in depth like I did a few weeks ago. If you want, you can catch that on Joey's YouTube channel. But they went out, they got Gilmore to replace Logan Ryan. They got Brandon Cooks to add to their depth at wide receiver. They got Coney Ely. They did lose Derek Rivers for the season, and Rob Ninkovich retired, so if they lose Coney Ely or Trey Flowers to an injury, they don't have any depth. And I think that's the Achilles heel that hurts the Patriots more than anything else, because they have good starters, but the depth they had at the defensive end position, even without Chris Long, that's gone. With Ninkovich retiring and with Derek Rivers on IR, they don't have that depth anymore. So if either defensive end goes down, that does not bode well for the Patriots, and that gives teams a hope of beating them in both the regular season and the playoffs. And there's really only 4 teams that have all their coaching staff members back: Pittsburgh, Detroit, Dallas, and the Giants. And New England, the only coach they lost is their tight ends coach, who's now the coordinator at Alabama, the offensive coordinator. And then you've got the Buccaneers, who are in the same situation. The only coach they lost is their tight end coach. So a lot of these teams, continuity is the key in the NFL. So the Patriots, I look for this team to have another strong season. They got more players in free agency, brought back Branch, brought in Lawrence Guy, they brought in Rex Burkhead, brought in Mike Gillislee. I could go on and on and on. Traded for Dwayne Allen from the Colts. This team might even be more stacked than next year's team. Initially, I had them at 14-2, losing to Buffalo and Miami on the road. I now have them winning those 2 games, but I'm not bold enough or audacious enough to pick the Patriots to go 16-0. So we'll give the Oakland Raiders in Mexico the only win over the Patriots. So the Patriots now go 15-1, and they're still my number 1 seed in the AFC. But you can make a case for any of those 4 teams I mentioned, or you can just talk about the Patriots. Joey, you got the floor.
Well, you guys there?
Yeah, we're here.
I'm getting a lot of static through here. Sorry.
It's all good. It sounds like you're beatboxing. I kind of enjoy it.
No beatboxing. Just hopefully the phone isn't starting to go out. I don't have the money for a new one yet. New England is probably the team to beat, but they get a couple injuries. It's going to be difficult. I don't worry about any injuries to the offense. Brady's shown he can, within that offense, he can make wide receiver nobody somebody. And but defensively, they get a couple injuries. They're going to fall off. Otherwise, they're probably going to be in the NFC Championship.
At the very worst, they will be in the AFC Championship, and I honestly think the only team with the personnel to beat them is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's assuming Tyler Matkovich ends up starting, because there were reports out of Steelers camp that they were really impressed with Tyler Matkovich. I don't trust Vince Williams. I remember we both spoke very highly of Tyler Matkovich out of Temple. We both had third-round grades on him after the 2016 NFL Draft, and T.J. Watt took the starting job from James Harrison. So James Harrison is now a rotational player, and Watt, because he had that big game against the Giants, he took the starting job from Harrison. I still think Pittsburgh's going to use Harrison later in the season, sort of give Watt the advantage right now, but wait to play Harrison if either one of the pass rushers gets injured, so he has more time to train, condition himself, improve his speed, so it looks like he's younger and rejuvenated. But we'll see what happens, but I think the only team with the personnel and the depth to compete with the Patriots right now is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we'll see, though. I think it's going to be one of those two teams in the AFC, and I've never been more certain about anything before. I would be shell-shocked if it were somebody else, even though there are a lot of people picking the Oakland Raiders to get to the Super Bowl this year. They're the trendy pick. Las Vegas reported that more people are placing bets on the Oakland Raiders to win the Super Bowl than any other team in the NFL this year, Joey. So that's interesting news. Pittsburgh and Oakland are mainly the two teams to look out for in this situation.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say AFC Championship is going to be New England and Oakland. I think Pittsburgh's going to lose to the Oakland in the division round.
I would love to see Oakland come into Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers, and then Marshawn Lynch catches an immaculate reception, and then he puts Skittles on the terrible towel. That would be funny. It's not going to happen, but I think that would be hilarious if it did. The Immaculate Beast Mode. Alright, I think the Patriots are going to be 15-1. We all have high hopes for this team. The next team has no hope. I think they would lose to the 0-16 Detroit Lions or the 0-14 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have holes at quarterback. Josh McCown is going to have to start all 16 games for them to have a chance at 5 wins. They have holes at left tackle. They have holes at right tackle. They don't have a center. There's holes on this team everywhere, and they don't have a receiver. They lost Marshall. They lost Eric Decker. They don't have a number 1 or number 2 cornerback. The one promising thing is their safety play. Jamal Adams, Marcus May, the 2 safeties they got, are both expected to start right away. They're moving Sheldon Richardson to outside linebacker, which I question, because I think he's more of a natural 5 technique player. So the New York Jets, I have them winning 1 game in Buffalo, 1 game at home against the Bills on Thursday Night Football. I have them losing every other game this season. They have some winnable games against the Chargers late in the year. They have another winnable game against the Browns, but it's in Cleveland. I think they lose that game. So the Jets, I'm looking at this team as the 1-15 team and the worst team in the NFL. There's a reason all 4 writers on our staff have them picking at number 1 in the draft. So we can go over their draft situation a little bit later once we clear the table of the NFC teams, but what words of wisdom would you offer the Jets, Joey, before we get to Kerm's thoughts on this Jets team?
That's all I really have to say. As a quarterback that is 32 years old and was on the downslide last year, that a quarterback who seemingly has trouble, even though he's disciplined, and learning offense. They have an offensive line that is kind of patchwork at this point. defense has enough holes in it and is anchored by a guy they got rid of last year to the Browns because they didn't want, but had no other choice but to take back in a trade. They needed somebody so desperately. It's not good at this point for the Jets.
Kern, what are your thoughts on the New York Jets before we dive into these NFC East teams?
It's going to be a long season.
Yep. With that being said, we're going to dive straight into the NFC East teams. Let's start off with the Dallas Cowboys. We did preview them on the Evolution Network. I don't know if it was last Monday, but it was a few weeks ago. We previewed them on the Chiefs show, but this Dallas Cowboys team has a lot working in their favor. The Ezekiel Elliott suspension is ongoing. It could get repealed. I feel like it may get reduced, but it depends on the outcome of the trial. Either way, I don't think the suspension affects their season. I have this team going 10-6, and if Elliott does get suspended for the first 6 games, he would return in Week 8, which is where I have Dallas going through a 3-game losing streak, because they play Washington on the road in Week 8. Then they get Kansas City at home, Week 9. And then they go to Atlanta, in Atlanta, for Week 10. So I have Dallas losing 3 in a row at that point, and then I have them losing 2 in a row in Weeks 14 and 15 when they play the Giants in New York and the Raiders in Oakland. So those are the points in the season where I have them losing. I also have them losing to the Giants in Week 1. So I think this team gets in at 10-6. They barely get the final wild card spot, but if they do, they're a team that could take off and ignite in the playoffs and go on a run. And if they don't get in, I think the next team that we break down, the New York Giants, could be the team that runs away with the NFC because they've got a lot of pieces back as well, and they reloaded at a lot of key positions. But what are your thoughts on this Dallas Cowboys team? Because they've got the best offensive line. McFadden did run for 1,000 yards under this unit before Elliott arrived. And Dak Prescott, he's going to have to show more leadership, more moxie. He did a great job as a rookie. He's got to build on that this year. So it's going to be interesting to see what this Cowboys team can do this upcoming season.
I got them going a 12-4. If I'm always forced from training camp, and well, seeing them on week camps, Dak Prescott is doing just as good as he did last year. In fact, he's even doing better than he did last year, improving on his long ball accuracy and everything. I don't see them losing twice to the Giants. And another report I heard today is that Thursday quarterback Russ is turning heads at camp to where they might get rid of more and have they looking to Russ as the backup.
That's an interesting point, Kerm, because I actually do like Cooper Rush better than Kellen Moore. I don't think either one can start if Dak Prescott goes down, but Cooper Rush has played better in the preseason than Kellen Moore. So I can see that to a point. And Cooper Rush is represented by Leigh Steinberg, too. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Cowboys are clearly, in my opinion, the favorites in the NFC this year. No matter what happens with the Ezekiel Elliott thing, the Cowboys, the very worst finish with 11 wins, 12 wins. They're going to be the favorites going in to go to the Super Bowl with the NFC.
All right, next up we have the New York Football Giants, and this team, they got Brandon Marshall to pair with Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham's actually on pace for more career receptions through his first 3 seasons. He's actually had more career receptions and receiving yards than Jerry Rice, which is astronomical when you think about it. They add Brandon Marshall, they get Rhett Ellison at tight end, they get Ingram. Their entire offensive line is back. Paul Perkins is taking over as the starting running back. I think he'll do an effective job running the football. They got Dalvin Tomlinson competing for a starting spot with another veteran on their team. They have a lot working for them. They have excellent depth at defensive end. Their starting linebackers are returning. Their outside linebackers are pretty good, but B.J. Goodson, their 4th-round pick in the 2016 NFL Draft from Clemson, he has overtaken Keenan Robinson as the starting middle linebacker. So if the Giants get sloppy play from Goodson or Robinson and they don't make the Super Bowl, if they don't go with an offensive tackle to replace Erect Flowers, they'll probably go with a middle linebacker because Erect Flowers got abused by T.J. Watt in that preseason game. He gave up 2 sacks to T.J. Watt. And when you're taking a guy in the top 10 and he's giving up 2 sacks to the guy who was drafted 30th, that's a rookie, that's a huge problem. So I think the Giants will probably move Flowers to right tackle in his contract year. They won't give him a 5th-year option if they don't make the Super Bowl this year because they have a lot of depth on their secondary with what they have in place with Apple, Dominique Rodgers, Cromartie, their guy I'm thinking of that they brought in through free agency, former Ram, Janoris Jenkins. That's it. So they have a lot of talent. And Darian Thompson and Landon Collins are both starting at safety. So I really do like some of the elements and qualities this New York Giants football team has. And as long as Eli avoids turnovers, I think they have a shot to win the NFC East, as crazy as it sounds, because all their coaches from last year are back, just like with Dallas. So I have them going 11-5, sweeping Dallas, and I have another NFC East team at 10-6, tied with the Cowboys, but they lose the overall tiebreaker to Dallas. And we'll mention that in a little bit, but I have the Giants at 11-5, winning the NFC East this year. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team, but I think they win the NFC East this year. What are your thoughts on the Giants? I think they're a wild card team at the very worst.
Yeah, they're probably a wild card team. I'll say the same thing I said about them last year. Eli Manning goes, they go. Eli will have to flip over his career throwing the ball. In his good years, we've seen Giants do. We're here to see what the Giants, unfortunately, are equal doing. He's got weapons this year, and that's the thing for Eli. He has weapons this year. No reason that he can have issues offensively. I'm going to say the Giants are a wild card team, but at the same time, I think as a wild card team, they have a chance to go to.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Joey. Giants are a dangerous wild card team because if you look back, the 2 Super Bowls that they won under Eli Manning, they won as the wild card team. So they're a very dangerous wild card team.
They are a very dangerous wild card team. They beat the Patriots in both Super Bowls, so look out because the Packers really did beat the Giants, then they went on to beat Dallas. So I don't know if they'll have that kind of magic this year, but let's move on to the next team on our rankings, the Philadelphia Eagles. Carson Wentz enters his 2nd season. They bring in LeGarrette Blount. This offensive line, they're going to have Lane Johnson back. If they have him and Peters for 16 games, the sky's the limit for this offense. They did trade Jordan Matthews, but they did get Ronald Darby to enhance their secondary, and he's a good veteran for that team because they got a lot of young corners in place, like Rasul Douglas, who's on the PUP list. Sidney Jones is still rehabbing from his injury, and they got Jalen Mills, too. So there's some young pieces in place for Philadelphia. At the same time, the cornerback situation does not look stable right now, but there's a lot of promise down the road. If one of the other corners from this year's draft can emerge and next to Ronald Darby, look out. The Eagles might do things in the NFC East this year. I have them at 8-8. I don't think they're ready to take that next step this year, but they could be in a year from now. They return all of their coaches except one at wide receivers coach. That's the only new coach they brought in. But I like what they have for the most part. And if they struggle this year or they go 8-8, they have a lot to look ahead to. Do they bring back their running back? Do they bring back one of their receivers? Do they bring back an offensive lineman? I think they're going to go offense in the first round of the 2018 draft, but I don't know where they're going to pick, and I'm not going to speculate on that right now. But I do think this is an 8-win team. But it's critical that they have a strong offseason if they want to maintain their momentum or set themselves up as a contender down the road. But I see an 8-8 team. Barnett's going to be a depth player. They've still got Brandon Graham and Connor Barwin. No, wait, they brought in Chris Long to replace Connor Barwin. Barwin's on the Rams with Robert Quinn. But the point is, the Eagles have a very good football team, and they have Schwartz as defensive coordinator, and they're not a team to sleep on. I don't think they're a playoff team yet, but their passing game is going to be pretty lethal.
Yeah, I have the Eagles at 8-8 as well. Around 500. They'll be a first season.
Yeah, I think with the Eagles, because last year you got a couple injuries on the offensive line, and Carson Wentz just flat fell apart. So I think in the second year for Wentz, the offensive line has to stay strong. Because if it doesn't, then that's it for them, because Wentz will have, why we Wentz develop, we're going to have a hard time without a strong offensive line, and that is especially tough for any quarterback without a strong offensive line. It's especially tough for a second-year quarterback without a strong offensive line. I think the offensive line is the key to the Eagles. So they are in the wild card hunt, or if they pass middle of the road.
That's a valid point, Joey. And going back to what you brought up, Lane Johnson got suspended 10 games for a failed drug test last year. The Philadelphia Eagles, when they had both Jason Peters and Lane Johnson as their starting offensive tackles, went a combined 5-0. But they only went 2-8 without their 2-9, I think. The Eagles went 7-9 last year, so they went 2-9 without Lane Johnson, but they went 5-0 with him in the starting lineup. So if both offensive tackles are healthy, look out, because they went 5-0 with both offensive tackles when healthy. The big loss on this offensive line is Andrew Barb. He was a left guard. They cut him in training camp, so that opens things up for the guy from TCU they drafted, Vaitmala, whatever his name is, and then Isaac Sumalo, the Oregon State lineman. One of them is going to have to take over at left guard, and that's going to be the weakness of this offensive line. So you've got that under control. They did bring in Jeff Allen from the Chiefs as a right guard. Maybe that was Houston, but the guard position is my biggest concern for the Eagles. I think they have a stable offensive tackle and center situation, but the guard play is going to be the Achilles heel of this offensive line.
I'm also not sold right now in the center position. I think that had a little bit of a drop off as the year went on last year. So hopefully they can rebound in that situation.
Yep, and the next team we get to, I have them at 10-6, but missing the playoffs. I have two teams at 10-6, Carolina and Washington, missing the playoffs. So I have 8 teams winning at least 10 games in the NFC, but 2 get screwed out of the playoffs. And Washington is a team that I really like on paper this year. They have Kirk Cousins back. Everybody on their offensive line, except for the left guard position with Lauvo, is great. You have a lot of depth at running back. You've got Pryor, you've got Jameson Crowder, you've got Josh Dotson, Jordan Reed is back. They did lose a lot of coaches, though. They lost McVay, they lost their quarterback coach, they lost their defensive backs coach, the Jaguars. So they did lose some pieces. However, they did get Ryan Anderson, even though Trent Murphy's going to be injured this year. I don't think that's a huge loss because The guy from Mississippi State that they drafted in 2016 has been very good for them, and he's been a solid starter. And then you've also got Ryan Anderson out of Alabama, who could be very good as a starter next to Ryan Kerrigan. So it's Preston Smith and Ryan Kerrigan, even with Trent Murphy injured, but I think Ryan Anderson getting more play time, this actually helps Washington more than it hurts them, because basically they were going to have Ryan Anderson learn the playbook if Murphy was healthy, but Murphy does not have the athleticism that a guy like Ryan Anderson does. So I actually think this injury is a blessing in disguise, because it gives Washington a better chance of finding out if Ryan Anderson can be that guy. And Jonathan Allen's going to be starting as a rookie. They have a lot of players coming back to this team. The secondary is going to be lethal with Josh Norman, Brashad Breeland. They've got Kendall Fuller in the nickel position. So, yeah, Kyle Fuller's on the Bears, but Kendall Fuller is a nickel guy. They've got 2 safeties in contract years. They've got 2 inside linebackers, Will Compton and Mason Foster, who both had over 100 tackles in contract years. So, Washington's an interesting team. And I have them at 10-6, but there are people that have this team struggling this year because the GM left. I know USA Today has them at 5-11. There's other people that are down on this Washington team. What do you think, Joey Kern? What do you think about Washington?
Well, Washington, I think, has a lot of potential. Cousins just got done throwing for his second 4,000-yard season. The entire thing, I like their offensive line. I'm worried about the secondary. I was worried about the secondary last year, and I was proved correct. I'm worried about their secondary this year. The cornerback, they were looking for help from guys that, they were playing Dante Whitner off the scrub list to try to shore up the safety position. Well, that gave a little bit of reinforcement for the short term. Whitner's old. He's not gonna make a huge difference. So this worries that the Washington Redskins haven't really addressed the secondary as a whole the way that I would expect them to. When it comes to with their game, they need to improve the run game. I think Matt Kavanaugh, offensive coordinator, is in a good place to do this, but at the same time, they've got Rob Kelly and Chris Thompson that are coming in as 1 to 2 start with Jake Green comes in at number 3, the rookie. And that doesn't really fill me with confidence. The right now, Stuart Craven is put in during his strong safety. DJ Swearinger at free safety. And I'm not seeing. Well, I like Craven and the potential he has. So he's going to be able to put it together this year. And I don't see any rookies or any major free agent signings that are going to make a difference on defense or in the running game this year.
They did get Terrell Pryor, but he's on a 1-year prove-it deal.
So that's not a defense, Chris. Or a running back.
Yeah, they didn't. It's a defensive signing. I didn't hear that part. Go ahead, Kerm.
I'm going to deal with why did you mention earlier? I got them finishing last in the division.
I'm guessing you have them around 7-9 behind the Eagles.
I would I would go 6-10.
Interesting. Somewhere in the middle of that, because USA Today had them at 5-11.
And Cousins say does enough for the Redskins to finally for offering him a long-term deal. I don't think they can franchise him again because he's already been franchised three times. So I don't think they're about to franchise him again.
Yeah, we'll go through my projected top 6 teams. I'm going to go through a projected playoff simulator for the remaining teams. So the New England Patriots went 15-1, got home field. Pittsburgh went 12-4. They beat the Colts head-to-head. They got the 2 seed. And then in the NFC, the Buccaneers were the only 12-win team at 12-4. The Giants went 11-5. They got the other first-round bye. So taking a look at our wild card games here in the AFC, we've got the 3 seed, 12-4 Indianapolis Colts hosting the 9-7 Oakland Raiders. And then we've got the 10-6 Chiefs versus the 10-6 Titans in the other AFC game. And then in the NFC, we've got Dallas, Green Bay, 10-6 Dallas team versus a 10-6 Green Bay team in a rematch of last year's divisional round game in Green Bay. And then you've got Atlanta versus Seattle in Seattle. Russell Wilson 5-0 at CenturyLink Field, but Atlanta's 11-5, Seattle's at 8-8. Kansas City and Tennessee, I'm going to pick Kansas City in this game as a number 4 seed because Marcus Mariota does not have that playoff experience under his belt. And I don't care if Mahomes or Alex Smith is starting. The Chiefs just have a more experienced defense that has been there, that has done that. NFC wildcard game, I'm going to pick Dallas over Green Bay. Green Bay's guard situation is a huge weakness now, like we pointed out on our season premiere, or one of our season premieres, when we broke down the NFC North and a few other divisions before Albert Ruiz came on. So I'm going to pick Dallas as a wild card in Green Bay on the road. It's going to be a tough test for Dallas, but this is the game. If they win this game and overcome adversity, this is the game that's going to fuel them to potentially make a Super Bowl run. Colts hosting the Raiders. I'm going to pick the Colts here because I feel like Andrew Luck is due for a comeback season at some point. And they got Quincy Wilson and Vonta Davis, and I'm not changing things unless Quincy Wilson gets placed on injured reserve because he did get injured in last night's preseason game. Ryan Kelly's going to miss the first 6 to 8 weeks, but that's not a big deal because they're playing teams like the 49ers, the Rams, cupcake teams. So they play the Browns and Indy. So I still think the Colts have that it factor, even though a lot of people are doubting them right now. And then finally, we have Atlanta versus Seattle. I'm going to go with Atlanta in Seattle. Seattle is 5-0 at home. They go 5-1 at home, and 0-3 versus Atlanta. So Atlanta defeats Seattle again in Seattle. So Atlanta moves on to the divisional round. If you want to share your wild card winners, Kern, before I get to the next round, you're welcome to do so. Or would it be easier for me to walk through my simulator entirely before we got to yours?
With the NFC, I got Dallas being the worst. When the Queen Bay takes New York instead of Dallas, like you have. And I have New York beating Queen Bay. And then Atlanta beating Seattle.
So we sort of have the same thing in the NFC, except you have the Giants beating Green Bay and then Atlanta beating Seattle.
I got New York and Atlanta winning the wild card round.
I'm just curious who your team with home field is, if it's Tampa Bay or Carolina, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Your AFC wild cards, I'm guessing you have the Chiefs in there as well, because you gave the Raiders a first-round bye, I think. I'm guessing Pittsburgh's hosting somebody, and the Chiefs are traveling to the AFC South winner, which is probably Tennessee. Probably of the same game, but instead of the Chiefs being the home team, the Titans would be the home team in your situation. And who would be the final wild card, Kerm, in the AFC?
Final wild card in the NFC?
The AFC.
I think it's going to be the Steelers or the Eagles. AFC North.
So we get a Steelers-Bengals rematch in the wild card round with the Bengals as the 6th seed, Steelers as the 3 seed, and then we get a Chiefs-Titans wild card in Tennessee. I'm guessing you're picking Pittsburgh to win the first of those wild card games, and then you're going to pick the Chiefs over the Titans. Are you leaning Tennessee if it's the game's in Tennessee?
I'm leaning the Tennessee.
All right, so Kerm probably is Pittsburgh and Tennessee winning. We'll get to the divisional round games right now, and we start with the home field teams. Kansas City and New England. In New England, the Patriots, they beat the Chiefs again for the second time in 3 years. They move on to the AFC Championship game. Dallas versus my number 1 seed, Tampa Bay. I think Winston's going to have a huge year, but this team lacks playoff experience. And the Buccaneers have never had home field in their entire history as a franchise. They were the number 2 seed the year they won Super Bowl 37. They were the number 2 seed. They lost the NFC Championship to the Rams. So this is a team that has never been in this situation where they've had home field. Dallas has had home field. They've blown it. They seem like they might be better on the road. So I'm going to take Dallas here to beat the Buccaneers in Tampa and move on to the NFC Championship game. Colts Steelers, I'm picking Pittsburgh, especially with that home crowd. This Colts defense, even though Andrew Luck's amazing, the defense will be lucky if they get past the wild card round. And then the Falcons versus the Giants. I'm going to pick the Giants in this one because Matt Ryan usually struggles outdoors, but they do enough to beat Seattle. The Giants are a different animal, though. And that sets up a Pittsburgh-New England rematch in New England, and I have Dallas facing the Giants in the NFC Championship. So those are my predictions for the divisional round games. Kerm, you've got New England and Oakland in the AFC. So who is in your NFC? Give me your NFC picture.
Dallas versus Atlanta. The Dallas coming out on top in a very close game.
So Dallas wins that game, and who is your other game? Who do you have winning the South and playing the Giants?
No. You say the divisional round. I have the division round. I have Dallas and Atlanta winning both their division games to face each other in the NFC Championship, with Dallas winning the NFC Championship.
I'm confused because you said you had Seattle and Atlanta in your wild card as well. But if you have Dallas and Atlanta winning their divisions, that would make them the top 2 seeds. That would put the Packers and the Giants in a wild card game, and then there's still one other team facing Seattle. I'm guessing it'd be Carolina or Tampa.
Atlanta's going to beat Seattle in the wild card, and then they're going to beat the team they face in the division round. And then they're going to lose to Dallas.
So you've got Dallas and Atlanta in the NFC Championship.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm guessing we both came to the same conclusion for the NFC and AFC Championship games. New England wins the AFC, Dallas wins the NFC.
Yeah.
I think even Joey is sort of at that point where we get Pittsburgh, New England winner versus Dallas in the Super Bowl. I mean, that's the consensus prediction. It's the popular prediction.
Yeah, for me, I do see Dallas as my favorite in the NFC. But the AFC, you have New England, you have Pittsburgh. You also have a lot of wild cards. This year, there are some up-and-coming teams, like Cleveland finally has some talent. You have Miami with Jay Cutler, and we already talked about how Cutler can beat the Brett Favre. We know that type of player is going to make money. Even 1 or 2 games can make a difference in setting the matchups and everything else. And this year in the AFC, a lot of potential for a lot of upsets, a lot of wins and losses going ways that people didn't think they would. So I'm not going to sit back and say this year it's the AFC, and I think that AFC predictions are going to have to stop what if anything's going to come up.
That's a valid point, Joey. I mean, there's going to be a lot more parity with the NFC and AFC. I have New England beating Dallas to win the Super Bowl. I'm curious, Kerm, who do you have winning the Super Bowl between Dallas and New England?
That's a tough one. It feels like gut, not with the heart. To go to the brain. I think I'm still going to have to go with Dallas in a very tight game. It will all depend on how that first quarter goes on. Who would win? I mean, it's going to be a very close game, I believe. Either way.
I am in complete agreement. I'm thinking 27-24, something along those lines. A field goal is going to be the deciding factor in this game. And Dan Bailey's been more reliable than Gostkowski over the last 2 years, even though Gostkowski is my favorite kicker in the AFC outside of Justin Tucker. So I could honestly see that going either way as well.
What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Sorry, my phone was trying to take this off my
Saying, what's your thoughts on a New England Dallas possible Super Bowl?
If it would come to that, I'd say Dallas. I think Dallas is just flat more talented. They're more talented, have fewer holes on their roster than New England does. So, Dallas.
Yeah, and we've cleared up every AFC East and NFC East team within the first hour, so we will try our best to get through as many teams in the 3-round mock draft that Tony Mario posted for draftutopia.com, because I haven't even posted the 3rd round of my mock yet. We'll go through the teams, the scenarios. Everybody's got the Jets picking at number 1 overall. 3 of us have Sam Darnold going there. Ryan Romero has Lamar Jackson going there. You might play devil's advocate and put Baker Mayfield there. We'll talk about that next week in our draft show, but Tony went with Darnold round 1, Iman Marshall, the USC corner in round 2, and Myles Gaskin, the Washington Huskies running back, who I have a 2nd round grade on in round 3. Now, I like Gaskin. I even like Marshall, but if the Jets draft Sam Darnold and they don't get him any offensive line help in free agency or the draft, they're just asking for Darnold to get injured. It's like they're throwing him out into the woods to evade wolves, or Scar from The Lion King for that matter. They're throwing him out there to get devoured. I mean, that's just irresponsible. I mean, what are your thoughts on this Jets draft if the Jets took this approach in the draft, Joey? I think if they got Darnold and they didn't get him any offensive line help, that would just be a disaster.
Well, Darnold has made some steps, but I'm not going to anoint him until I see what steps those take that he's taken in the offseason come into the regular season. But at the same time, if the Jets decided, hey, we're going to draft Darnold, that's right. At this point, he's probably the best project in the draft. I mean, he could step in probably, if he has good coaching, right after the camp and start. If he has good coaching right now with the Jets, that's saying something. So, we're going to have to see what happens with the Jets as far as coaching and so on and so forth. And if they draft him and all that happens, and then they decide, you know, as we mentioned earlier with the Jets, their offensive line, well, if they're going to be an offensive line, that's going to be a problem. So you need the offensive line help, you need the receiver help. Running game is not that bad. But the rest of it, if they decide to take it, he's got a lot of stuff he needs to do. And if they can't surround him with talent, I mean, you're basically asking him to take it.
Yeah, I like what the Jets have. I mean, I don't really like what the Jets have at receiver, but at the same time, they invested a lot in Ardarius Stewart, Chad Hansen, Jordan Leggett. I almost feel like the Jets need to take Darnold and get 2 offensive tackles on day 2, a left tackle and a right tackle. I know the weapons they have with Stewart, with Chad Hansen, Jordan Leggett at tight end aren't the best, but I think your best bet at this point is to get 2 offensive tackles that can protect Darnold and just try to take a chance on those rookies you drafted in 2017 and pray they pan out. And if they don't, you can get a receiver or more playmakers for Darnold in 2019. But at this point, you just have to pray things work out.
Yeah, number 1 receiver is really Mike. I see that big number 1 receiver that can bail out Darnold. So that would be interesting to see.
All right, Kerm, any thoughts on the Jets before we get to the next team on Tony's list? All right.
I'm here.
Okay, Ryan, we just broke down the AFC and NFC East divisions before you showed up, and we broke down the Jets situation and Tony Mario's mock draft. Darnold, Iman Marshall, a USC corner, and then Myles Gaskin. So we basically just said if they get Darnold, they don't get him any offensive line help, then that's going to be an absolute disaster. And the Jets have to draft an offensive lineman. But any thoughts on this Jets team? You can make your rebuttal for Lamar Jackson here really quickly, or we can save that for the draft show next week before we go through the... let's go through as many teams as we can in this mock, and you can give your Lamar Jackson rebuttal on the next week's show, because that's going to be a draft show next Sunday. Let's go into the 49ers at 2. Josh Allen out of Wyoming is their number 2 pick. Tony mentions how he has bigger hands than Carson Wentz or Andrew Luck by reports. Deion Kane out of Clemson was a slot receiver this year next to Artavis Scott and Mike Williams, but he's going to be the number 1 target next year. Mike McCray out of Michigan, a linebacker on the strong side. Jerron Christian is a right tackle. He was a left tackle at Louisville the last 2 years, but he dominated at right tackle in high school, so he might convert to right tackle in the NFL because he struggled at left tackle. And then Nick Chubb, the Georgia running back, who at one point was actually pushing. I remember in 2015 or 2016 when Walter Football posted their very first 2017 mock, Nick Chubb and Leonard Fournette were 1A and 1B, but then Nick Chubb had the injury against Tennessee. His stock fell, the rest is history. So all of these guys on the 49ers that Tony has mocked are boom or bust players. Allen, Kane, McCray, Gerard Christian, Nick Chubb. And if they hit on all these guys, San Francisco is back there. And in this scenario, I at least have to applaud John Lynch for trying to put something together. It might backfire, it might cost him his job if none of these guys pan out, but at least he's trying to get some weapons for Allen to make San Francisco a little bit more competitive. Any thoughts on this Niners draft? Because it is compelling with all these boom or bust players.
The 49ers, I wouldn't even call it compelling because most of the boom or bust players are average players. I mean, they made some great trades. Made a couple good early draft picks, but I mean, paid more. I mean, they're going to have to do a lot more. Like Nick Chubb, yeah, he has some potential. Wow, that's great. I like Nick Chubb.
Well, they got Nick Chubb with the pick that they got from the Bears in the Trubisky trade. So they got Nick Chubb with that pick, the Chicago third-round pick for 2018 in the Trubisky trade. So that only validates how dumb the Bears were, because they surrendered the rights to Nick Chubb as well as those picks if the Niners went Chubb in that direction.
Yeah, but you said rumor buzz, does he have superstar potential?
He has superstar potential. He blocks well. The problem is he has trouble staying healthy, just like Carlos Hyde.
Well, I say no, he doesn't have superstar potential. He has star potential. I think he can be a consistent 1,000-yard rusher if he stays healthy, as you said. But he's going to get 1,200, 1,400 yards every year? No, he's not. And so you're saying, okay, we got a nice piece to the puzzle if he pans out. And that's basically what you have. Potential to have a couple nice pieces to the puzzle, but you have those big difference makers. Would Chubb be able to carry that offense if necessary? No. He wouldn't. And so that's what you're looking at. If you say you have a franchise running back, you say, let's say you have a guy like, let's just go with Barry Sanders, just for fun. Barry Sanders, you didn't have to have a great quarterback. Or if you had a decent quarterback and he went down with injury, Barry Sanders could carry that off. Is Nick Chubb going to carry an offense? No. Is he going to be Adrian Peterson? Starting quarterback goes down. Peterson doesn't keep the offense. Chubb going to do that? No. Is even with the 49ers over the years, they had those running backs. Even Garrison Hurst in his prime, quarterback goes down, Garrison Hurst gets 1,250, 30, whatever. Yeah. Otherwise, he was a 900 to 1,000-yard rusher. He was able to step up and do that. I don't see that in Chubb. I see Chubb as a very nice piece to the puzzle if he pans out. I don't see the superstar. I don't see if somebody goes down, I can carry this team. But I do see a very nice piece of the puzzle if he pans out.
Yeah, I see a solid borderline starter, but many are crowning him to be a superstar. He could be a good value pick in the second or third round, so I hear you. You look at what the Jets did, Ryan, and what the 49ers did. I'm guessing the 49ers had the better draft because they put some pieces around Josh Allen, but still two questionable drafts by those two franchises. What are your thoughts on this, Ryan, before we get to the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, I would say between the 49ers and the Jets, the 49ers definitely had like the better overall outcome. To me, I feel like the Jets have kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit throughout the past couple of drafts. So, I mean, of course, they're going to hit on some players, but I really think that this next year is going to be a make or break. Hey, are they going to go into crisis mode knowing that they might draft a bust with Darnold, or are they going to go in full rebuilding mode and actually get Jackson on the team?
Yep, and the Chicago Bears are on the clock at number 3 here in Tony's mock. I have them at 2. Everyone else has the Bears at 2 and the 49ers at 3, but the Bears are number 3 in Tony's mock, and he has them going Arden Key at number 3, LSU outside linebacker. He pointed out how Lamar Houston and Pernell McPhee, if they release both players, they save over $15 million against the cap. Also mentioned how they might want to extend Charles Leno because his footwork's improved this year, and then to top that off, you get Arden Key, an edge player with 4.4 speed, and then you pair him with Leonard Floyd, 234 outside linebackers for that defense, who can both play off the edge. You're talking about a pass rush that may be able to get Trubisky more time on the field. That doesn't mean Trubisky or Mike Glennon or whoever's their quarterback's going to be good. That pass rush would just give their quarterback more opportunities to score points. So that's the one thing I like with the Arden Key pick. They also went Jordan Thomas round 2. and they traded their third rounder to the 49ers in the Mitch Trubisky trade. But if the Bears just go defense with their first 2 picks, they ignore that left tackle spot, they don't get another receiver for Trubisky. Do you think that's irresponsible drafting on their end, Joey?
Responsible drafting. The Chicago Bears and the Mitchell Trubisky. How do I ever go about answering that? Sorry, when you said I was...
Like, when I mentioned Chicago Bears and irresponsible drafting, the first thing that comes to your mind is them trading up for Trubisky.
Yeah, my mind kind of froze up when I heard even irresponsible. I thought you said responsible, and it was just...
No, irresponsible, that's what I said.
Yeah, I got you. I thought you said responsible, and my mind kind of froze on me here. Irresponsible is one word for it. Trubisky's been praised because he went 16 for 25. Probably a good 12 of those completions were running around outside the pocket. That's not exactly NFL quarterbacking to me. I know 3 of those incompletions were from the pocket. They got batted down. Trubisky he made a couple nice throws from the pocket, I'll give him that. But his long windup and limited play, batted balls, almost stumbled one time coming out of the snap. He didn't really look as comfortable in the pocket as Deshaun Watson, Sean Kaiser, Nate Peterman. Those guys look like in the pocket like, hey, we're going to step up. We're going to do all this step up. And he either got it and threw it, but he didn't step up. And most of the time when he had a pocket, when he was able to do something other than get the ball batted, it was a clean pocket. He didn't do much with that situation. So to say we traded up one spot for a guy that would have been available to us the spot after, and then we tried to make this guy look like a world beater by sending him on the same exact offense he ran at college with the rollouts and such. Doesn't exactly scream response. Screams more like he trying to get everything to look like, or trying to look like genius, and instead of actually doing things in an intelligent way. And that intelligently, you want Mitch Trubisky to learn. Don't trade him. As you said, irresponsible drafting. You want Mitch Trubisky to succeed? Fine. Don't put him out there. Let him develop a pocket presence, a pocket work. Because that goes right back into irresponsible drafting, because not only do you trade up for him, but now you're trying to make him look better and boost up his ego to something it's not. That is something irresponsible.
Well said, Joey. And the Bears going defense instead of offense in this draft, if that happens, you develop Trubisky for a second year in a row, and you let Mike Glennon play out that contract. All right, any thoughts on the Bears before we get to the Los Angeles Rams at number 4, Ryan? Because I think the Los Angeles Rams are probably the one big winner based off the teams in the top 4.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I actually like the Rams more than a lot of people do, just because I feel like they do have...
I was asking you about Chicago, Ryan.
Oh. I heard the Rams at the end. I was going to kind of get to that, though.
I was going to read the Rams picks and then get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so basically with the Chicago team, I'd say the Bears have kind of gone up and down. I mean, they did end up finding a receiver or two throughout, whether it's free agency or whatever have you. But Mitch Trubisky, to me, is going to be a bust from the get-go, so they really need to make sure that they get him an offensive line and take time in developing him.
That's why if they don't get any offensive linemen in that next year's draft and they throw him into the fire, it's a situation set up for failure, which is my huge thing. And now, number 4, the Los Angeles Rams in Tony Mario's mock draft. They got Mike McGlinchey in the first round out of Notre Dame as a right tackle to complement Andrew Whitworth at left tackle. They can kick him over to left tackle when they move on from Whitworth. And then in round 3, they got Baker Mayfield. And Sean Manning's not a very good backup. So if you keep Sammy Watkins, you get McGlinchey in the draft, you pick top 5, and Jared Goff struggles in the preseason a la Blake Bortles, and Mayfield's dominating like these rookies, that's actually a situation where Baker Mayfield, who is one of Joey's favorite quarterbacks in this class, could very easily unseat Jared Goff as the starting quarterback on the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, Mark doesn't believe that Mayfield's going to have that kind of impact, but I'm not ready to pull the trigger and say it's over, Goff's a bust. But that's definitely an interesting scenario, and I think if the Rams went that route, if McGlinchey fell out of the top 3, the Rams took him at 4, and then they get Baker Mayfield as a project quarterback to develop, or an insurance policy if Jared Goff doesn't take those strides by year 3, assuming you keep Sammy Watkins. I think that makes them the clear winner of the 4 teams we've projected so far, Ryan and Joey. What are your thoughts?
I think that's silly. I think they have a great quarterback with Goff, and they've already started to develop the right pieces. They're starting to be up and coming. I think no matter who they would draft, whether it be Baker Mayfield or my guy Browning, as far as being safe picks, I mean, they already have their quarterback. I mean, that's just kind of a ridiculous scenario to look at.
Well, in this mock, Tony's got the Rams picking in the top 5. So if they were picking in the top 5, they get McGlinchey and a QB.
Top 3, wherever the Rams are picking, they trade down.
Well, here's the thing. Last year, I'll put it the best way I can, Jared Goff was a hot hand. That's me putting it kindly, putting it mildly, being very nice to the guy. His small hands were on very good display, where he couldn't keep a hold of the ball. He was throwing interceptions. He wasn't getting things done. He had trouble learning the offense. He was a hot mess last year. You can say he's got potential, sure. Alright, let's go with that. He's got potential. Unfortunately for him, or fortunately, however he responds to it, the Rams got him help. Might have been a little late, but they got him help this year. Right now, Jared Goff has 0 excuses for having another season like he did last year. He has another season like he did last year. He's done in St. Louis. They're not going to put up with it. They fired Jeff Fisher because he couldn't get it done. You think they're going to put up with Jeff Fisher's quarterback? Probably not. So, you're looking at a situation where the new regime, new people, they brought in help for the guy who is the #1 overall quarterback, a guy who's been sent the 5th round quarterback that was drafted, that was his backup, with a better prospect. If you got a chip on your shoulder, that Jared Goff's got everything he needs to succeed. If he doesn't, he's done. And in that case, I can see either Browning or Mayfield coming in and taking Goff.
Yeah, but in this scenario,
that's a little ridiculous. How do you guys
Ryan, I was going to add something. In this scenario, McGlinchey went 4th overall, and they got Baker Mayfield in the 3rd round. And I'm saying that Baker, in that scenario, if the Rams pick top 5, Baker might be able to come in and take Jared Goff's job, which is what Joey was getting at.
Because what you have to remember, Ryan, Jeff Fisher's quarterback, they fired Jeff Fisher. New regime usually means new quarterback. #1 overall or not. And Goff did nothing last year to inspire confidence in that organization that he can be the man.
So, new regime means different culture, different changes, so that might take a season or 2 to get used to.
Also, Les Snead's still the GM of the Rams, so if they fire him this offseason, New regime's going to make changes regardless. So if Les Snead gets fired, they're taking a quarterback at some point.
Yeah, it's something that has been done, Ryan. Empirical evidence shows new regime, new quarterback, they rarely stay with the old one unless he is entrenched as the franchise guy, the best guy to start. And last year, Goff wasn't even the best guy to start in a lot of cases. The Rams didn't have a quarterback that was good to start. Goff was slow. He couldn't learn what was basically a junior high school offense. And so this regime has no ties to Goff. They have no reason to keep Goff. They're giving him a shot. And so he's got this shot. They've got pieces around him. It doesn't matter that he was the number 1 overall pick to us. What it is that he's not our guy, but we're going to give him a season to see what he's got because he was the number 1 overall pick. So let's see what he does. It doesn't matter about his development. They're going to want their guy. If he proves to be their guy, they'll keep him. If he doesn't, he's done.
And they're probably going to draft
you guys are talking about, I mean, how many teams have actually successfully been able to make that transition and trade a quarterback or rebuild and then be able to find a quarterback?
Now, we didn't say it was a success. We say it's done. Okay?
Like, that's how teams operate from a business standpoint. Whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision is debatable. But that is how most football teams operate from a business standpoint. And in this mock draft, Tony had the Rams picking at 4. So if they took the top offensive tackle to get Goff some protection, and then they took a QB in the 3rd round, that QB would have a chance to replace Goff if he sucked, and they got him the protection along with the weapons they've got him this offseason. That's what Joey and I have been getting at this.
Now, I will say, Ryan, to your point, if McGlinchey does fall to the Rams, they take McGlinchey. There's nothing about that. You put up with Goff for another year, give him another year to develop. I don't care if McGlinchey.
I mean, no.
Ryan,
if you
let
do
Joey
that, though,
finish.
Joey, I mean, do you not end up like the Cleveland Browns did when they took Joe Thomas? I mean, they had a great left tackle, but where the hell did that get him?
Well, the thing was that these past regimes have been unable to draft a quarterback with more than 3 brain cells, a lively arm, or a massive alcohol problem. And I don't think, and when you have situations like that, oftentimes front offices learn what not to do, and there's a big emphasis right now on character, and one of the biggest problems for the Browns, they would draft guys with no character. They have this great left tackle, but they draft quarterbacks that's like you scratching your head and saying, why are they taking this guy?
And the other thing is you need 2 offensive tackles in order to maximize your quarterback's odds of success. They have one in Andrew Whitworth at left tackle, but they don't have a right tackle because they moved Rob Havenstein from right tackle to right guard. Now they moved him back to right tackle. So that right tackle situation is a mess. And if Mike McGlinchey falls to 4, you pull the trigger, you get him. Now Goff has 2 offensive tackles. And if you take Baker Mayfield in the 3rd round and Goff screws up, he's done. No excuses. You have 2 offensive tackles. You have a ton of weapons. Even Watkins, Cooper Kupp, no excuses. 2 tight ends, no excuses like Joey's been stating.
Yeah, so they're giving him this year as a chance. If he shows enough, then they may keep him for another year. But Jared Goff is on a year-to-year loaner with the new front office.
I feel like they'll keep him for 2 more years. They'll start him this year, they might bench him next year in 2018, and then he's done.
Well, they might, but that's the thing. He's on a year-to-year. They might not. If he shows it like Ryan seems to think he will, they'll probably keep him. Okay, let's develop this.
Yeah, I have the Rams at 7-9, 2nd place in this division. I'm not going by what I think's happening in my mock draft. I'm going by what one of my writers thinks, and he thinks the Rams are going to be picking at 4th overall, which is worse than where they picked last year at number 5. But that pick was traded to the Titans in the Jared Goff trade. So if they're picking that high, they're probably going to move on from Goff at some point.
Yeah, if the Rams go 7-9, Goff will get another year. If they're picking 4, he's probably not going to get another year. So, I mean, it's based on not only his performance, but the team's performance, where he's leading. So, with the new management group is going to be watching that.
All right, picking it.
You guys, I've been here a little longer than I probably should. I've got to go.
Hold on, we were going to do the Browns next, Joey, and then you can go. They're picking at 5, and then we can end. Can you stick around for the Browns and then... All right, I'll get the Browns out of the way here. Number 5, they take Christian Kirk out of Texas A&M. Number 6, from the Texans, they get Josh Rosen out of UCLA. Round 2, with their 3 second-round picks, they get Adonis Alexander, a corner Ryan is a first-round grade on, and a Virginia Tech. They get Ronnie Harrison out of Alabama, a safety I have a first-round grade on in round 2. They get Bo Scarborough with the Eagles pick out of Alabama in round 2. And then in the 3rd round, they go with another receiver, Paris Campbell, out of Ohio State, who could be their number 1 receiver for the Buckeyes this year and who could surge up boards. So I feel like that's a great draft for the Browns, but there's 2 problems. One, they ignored a right tackle for depth in case Cameron Irving is a disaster or Sean Coleman is a disaster. And number 2, taking Josh Rosen, who has problems with tapping the football at number 6, you're basically giving Deshaun Kaiser the finger if you take Josh Rosen in the 1st round, because Kaiser might be ready to go by that point. Like, that's my only issue with Josh Rosen going to the Browns. Sure, he could be another Peyton Manning, but he might end up being a Johnny Manziel-type quarterback as well. So, I don't know if the Browns would take Rosen in that situation at number 6 overall, but they get Christian Kirk, a blue-chip receiver, my favorite receiver in the draft at 5. I love that pick, but Josh Rosen at 6, after taking Kaiser, I kind of want to question that a little.
Can I say something real quick?
Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah, Kirk is a good pick. Yeah, I don't see Kenny Britt as a long time number 2. The Rosen is the disaster. I was just breaking down some film of Kaiser after I got done with the Peterman pick, and Kaiser, even though it was against 3rd stringers, looked absolutely amazing with his pocket presence, and his footwork has gotten a lot better. And he still has some development to do, but he stays in there, keeps his eyes downfield, does everything you want a quarterback to do. So taking Josh Rosen, despite with his problems with his maturity, perceived lack of leadership according to his teammates, he taps the ball, as you said, fundamental issue. It's completely irresponsible. I know he's still got a lot of hype, but that's not really going to save it unless he corrects all these issues. But giving him to the Browns, who have Kaiser, who has exceeded expectations, already knows the playbook, and has been putting in extra time after practice, doing all the things that you would expect a number 1 overall pick to do. That's not good.
And it hurts from a team chemistry standpoint, since you got Kaiser in the 2nd round, too.
It does, and then he's already playing with the 1st team, so he's definitely being groomed as that quarterback of the future. So I think the Browns are going to keep him as the quarterback of the future, because they don't put a rookie getting 1st-team reps if he's not in that spot. And then you can, the 2nd and 3rd round, pretty good picks. Don't have time to get into them, but I don't see anything wrong with either of those.
So the remaining 2nd-round picks, you look at Adonis Alexander, Ronnie Harrison, Bo Scarborough. I'm sure if they went that route, got all those guys in the 2nd round, plus 3rd round Paris Campbell, it's a great draft for them. So that's Joseph Potter of Draft Evolution, the Evolution Network. He's got to go, but great talk about the Browns, as usual. So I will post the link to his channel Ryan, what are your thoughts on this Browns draft? I don't like the Rosen pick at 6, but I love the Christian Kirk pick at 5, and then to get all the weapons in round 2, like Tony suggested, Adonis Alexander, a corner you loved and had a round 1 grade on out of Virginia Tech, Ronnie Harrison, the Alabama safety, that is a first-round prospect on a lot of boards, and then Bo Scarborough, one of your favorite running backs in round 2. It's almost like the Browns draft last year all over again.
I mean, yes and no. I think that they should stick with Kaiser and let him continue to develop. I did like the pick of the cornerback with, I think you said it was Alexander?
Yeah, Adonis Alexander out of Virginia Tech, because you get Kirk at 5, you get Rosen at 6, which I'm not a fan of, but you get Adonis Alexander, you get Ronnie Harrison out of Alabama, and then Bo Scarborough out of Alabama with the Eagles pick in the 2nd round. Those are excellent picks. Except for the Rosen pick, this is an excellent draft.
I think if Bo Scarborough goes to the Browns, I don't think he succeeds. I think he needs to go somewhere like, just like a more warm climate, whether it's like the Texans, Dolphins, maybe go to the Colts to start to develop underneath Gordon. But as far as the Browns draft, it was okay, but I feel like they kind of grabbed too many of the same pieces. I think that they really need to focus on the positions that they have a question mark at, and then just build the living crap out of that offensive line to make it so deep that they feel comfortable no matter who the quarterback is in the pocket.
Yeah, Cameron Irving at right tackle is terrible, even though he was drafted in the 1st round. And Sean Coleman turns 27, even though he could be a solid starter. So he's not that long-term piece. So I feel like that's the one criticism, that and Rosen. But Marquez Rosen is his number 2 QB behind Darnold. So there's people that love Rosen and believe he's that good. So I'm not going to dismiss it, but I just wish Rosen was mocked to a different team. I don't hate the pick. I feel like that's a bad fit for Rosen. Number 7.
I agree with you.
I had the Texans took Lowell Lotulelei. I don't understand that pick because they've already got DJ Reader and they got Carlos Watkins, who we had a 1st round grade on in the 4th round. So I don't understand why they'd take another nose tackle. Brad Noble, diehard Texans fan, who follows our podcast and our draft site, Draft Utopia, he has been harping about the Texans needing to get an offensive lineman. And this is a very stacked offensive tackle class. So, I mean, I did get Davenport, but he's still a project. He needs another year to develop. And I think the Texans have to get an offensive tackle if they're picking this high at 70. If they're not, they can just take the best player on their board, reload at offensive tackle in 2019, and give Watson a full season. But it's not a good offensive line right now. Dwayne Brown's injured. Derek Newton's on IR for the 2nd year in a row. So there's a lot of question marks on the offensive line, and you want to play Tom Savage as long as you can before throwing Watson into the fire with this dire offensive tackle situation. Any thoughts on the Texans before we get to your Denver Broncos here at number 7 in this draft?
I feel like the Texans need to think about getting someone in the 2nd or 3rd round, possibly, to be able to back up J.J. Watt just in case. I feel like that would start to be a good move. But I definitely do agree, though, the Texans need an offensive line. I think that they might be in the running for my guy, Orlando Brown.
If he makes it to the 3rd round, I don't think he'll make it. The Texans don't have a 1st or a 2nd round pick, but if Orlando Brown is there in round 3, pull the bleeping trigger. Heck, if he makes it to round 2, I'm not against the idea of trading that 3rd rounder in this year's draft and a 2nd next year's draft if it means going up and getting Orlando Brown. But yeah.
So they don't have a 1st or 2nd round pick
this year, 2018.
And that's the kicker right there, because there's enough players in that 1st and 2nd round where they could have made that immediate impact. So
they basically traded. They gave the Browns a 2nd round pick just to get Brock Osweiler off their hands, because they didn't want Osweiler on the roster. So they basically rewarded the Browns with a 2nd round pick in next year's draft just to take Brock Osweiler on their hands. And then they traded their 1st rounder in this draft and in the next one to move up for Watson. So they don't have a pick until the 3rd round this year.
Yeah, they're kind of in a little bit of a pickle right now, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot of talent in those rounds, and you gave up your pick just to be able to get rid of somebody to clear cap space, and they panned out not to be so good.
Yes, number 7, the Denver Broncos. I don't think they'll be picking this high. I do have them at 9 in my current mock draft, but that was when I had them at 6 and 10. I'm actually going to move them up to 7 and 9, and they'd be picking at 15. And that's exactly where Nick Kendall of Scout.com, who had a top 10 grade on Garrett Bowles, he has them picking at number 15 as well with an 8-8 record. So I'm going to move Denver up to 15. They'll pick there at 7 and 9. They'll be the best 7 and 9 team based off of strength of schedule. But let's go through some of these picks in Tony's mock. Number 7, they get Connor Williams as a right tackle out of Texas to Garrett Bowles. This is a pick I actually really like because Garrett Bowles has asserted himself as the left tackle. He's talked about how a quarterback is like his wife. If you mess with him, he's going to knock your ass to the ground. You like that leadership. You like that quality. The problem is the right tackle situation, Donald Stevenson, Menelik Watson, if they both screw up this year, then another right tackle will be needed. Connor Williams out of Texas is a really good offensive tackle, and he's capable of playing right tackle or kicking inside to guard. So in this situation, Connor Williams, who is my consensus number 3 offensive tackle, people have him ahead of Okorafor. He goes to Denver here in round 1. Denver gets Josh Sweat in round 2, which I'm a little bit baffled by. But the thought process is DeMarcus Walker is going to convert to 5 technique because of his size, being 270 or 280. They'll keep Shane Ray and Von Miller, but they'll get another pass rusher for depth, so they go Josh Sweat. I feel like they could go with a quarterback at that spot with all the QBs in this class. And then number 3, third round, they go Royce Freeman, running back out of Oregon. I do like Royce Freeman. I think he is the undisputed best prospect on the Oregon Ducks, now that Carrington's no longer on the team. And I had a higher grade on him than Carrington. But my problem with Royce Freeman out of Oregon is he has injury issues. C.J. Anderson missed part of last season, went on IR. Jamal Charles is injury prone. Booker is now injury prone. He was injury prone at Utah. He stayed healthy somewhat as a rookie, but he's already out for the season this year. So those injury issues he had at Utah already coming back to haunt the Broncos. Now you add another injury-prone running back. I don't have a problem with Denver taking a running back, but they should get someone who's not injury-prone. And unfortunately for them, Royce Freeman and Nick Chubb, the top 2 running backs on the board, both have their fair share of durability issues. So they should probably get a QB on day 2, and if they want a running back, wait for somebody like an Akram Watley or a Ralph Webb or an LJ Scott or a Justin Jackson, somebody from the Big Ten that can spark that running game. Any thoughts, Ryan?
I mean, I like the Freeman pick. I think he's a solid player out of Oregon. But, I mean, past that, I'm not too impressed with that draft. The Connor Williams right tackle makes sense, but I'm kind of a toss-up on that.
Yep. Number 8, the Miami Dolphins are on the clock here. At number 8, they went with Derwin James out of Florida State to pair up with Rashad Jones. Then they went with Duke Ejiofor, the Wake Forest pass rusher, as a long-term building block next to Charles Harris because Cameron Wake is in his 30s, and they need a starter at 43 right end with Mario Williams gone. I know Thomas believes that Harris is the I sort of believe that he's the replacement with Charles Harris, but looking at Miami's situation, Charles Harris was brought in to replace Mario Williams. He wasn't brought in to be groomed behind Cameron Wake. Sorry, Thomas, you're wrong on this one. You get another defensive end, he can take over for Wake, and Harris can replace Mario Williams. So that's the thought process there, which I agree with. And then they went with Tyrell Williams out of Oregon, who played both offensive tackle positions and guard in high school. Did well at right tackle. He stopped DeMarcus Walker and Joey Bosa on tape. But he is a better fit for a guard. And Miami's got a good offensive tackle situation. So they can take Tyrell Crosby out of Oregon, who is a natural right tackle, terrible left tackle. They can kick him inside to guard because the Dolphins have a very dire guard situation. And I've studied this guard class outside of Quentin Nelson, Wyatt Teller and Will Hernandez, there isn't a starting guard in the entire draft based on what I've seen. I'll promote the SWAT reports for that after the show, but there's going to be offensive tackles with the versatility to kick inside to guard. Archie Lewis, Orlando Brown, Connor Williams, Martez Ivey, Jamarco Jones, Tyrell Crosby out of Oregon. There are numerous guys, Ryan, that are versatile enough to kick inside to guard, even though they're natural offensive tackles. And with this being a weak guard group outside of the blue chip guards, or the 3 guards that are just pure guards, teams might have to take offensive tackles this year and kick them inside to guard if they're to fill that guard situation, Ryan. You know, it's sort of that bad this year.
You know, I would say of all the players you named now, I think the one that would make the best transition from tackle to guard, and that's just because of the way his game is, would be Connor Williams.
Interesting, because he did play both guard spots in high school, but Miami going with Tyrell Crosby with great tape during the 2015 college football playoff. So I actually like that pick. I'd give this draft a B grade. It's not a bad draft, but you could argue that the Dolphins could do a little bit better. Maybe a B+, because I did like the first 2 picks. Not sure how I feel about Crosby there, kicking inside to guard, but I'd give it an A, anywhere between an A- and a B grade. It's a solid draft.
I give it a C+. I wasn't impressed with it.
Really? Derwin James, round 1. Ejiofor is a good round 2 guy. I mean, might even be a late round 1. I don't think there's any debating that, so we'll see. The Chargers wasted their first-round pick on Mitch Hyatt, a left tackle, because Russell Okung's under contract until 2019. They could get a right tackle, but the thing with Hyatt is he lacks the strength. He has excellent footwork, but he needs to get stronger. He's only 295 pounds. He doesn't maintain blocks well. I've watched 7 games of his tape, and he only impressed me in 2 of those 7 games. So to take a guy who's only impressed you twice in 7 games in the top 10, you can argue that's irresponsible. They also went Chase Hansen out of Utah to fill a safety need in round 2 and then a defensive end in round 3 rather than a defensive tackle. So the Chargers, without a doubt, have had the worst draft so far among these teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chargers are actually in a good spot just because the front office has been doing a lot better as far as scouting players. So
they don't get Forrest Lamp this year, though, and Mike Williams isn't going to be back until week 9 or 10. So they're a team that could strike next year if they're picking the top 10 again and they get everything right. They're a team that could strike next year, but I don't think they're ready to make that transition quite yet. I still think they're a 7-9 team, and with an easier schedule, they might be able to get over that hurdle in a year from now. Number 10, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. They went Christian Wilkins, best player available over need in round 1. Round 2, they get a left tackle, Trey Adams out of Washington, who I moved into my first round of my offensive tackle rankings. And they kick Robinson inside to guard. In round 3, they get Jake Browning to replace Blake Bortles. So Browning and Adams, 2 teammates at Washington, actually end up reunited in Jacksonville, which I actually like because it boosts their team chemistry. And if Jake Browning can't find any receivers open or has trouble connecting with these receivers, remember, they've got Robinson, they've got Marquise Lee, Alan Hearns. They've got guys for depth like Rashad Green out of Florida State, who was Winston's #1 target after Benjamin left. You've got Dede Westbrook, guys who are developing. So if they lose Allen Robinson, they can just bump up one of the guys that they're developing. I don't think it will hurt them that much. But Robinson's the one player I wouldn't want to lose. But I think they can afford to lose Lee or Alan Hearns. But I'd do everything in my power to keep Robinson. But I love this draft for the Jaguars, Ryan.
You know, I agree with you. Keep everything in your power to keep Robinson there and just say, hey, is there any way that you could work out with us as far as, you know, let us go ahead and start scouting a quarterback and let you catch some balls from him to see if the chemistry's there, see if you like him, and at this point, just be like, hey, we want to be able to get a solid quarterback, build the franchise, and get you the numbers that you deserve.
The other thing is...
Right now, I feel like...
Go ahead. I was going to mention how Blake Bortles...
I feel like if they start to bomb the season too much, if I am them, do you actually sit down and consider trading Robinson while he still has value?
Yeah, I mean, Allen Robinson, you could trade him at the deadline. And this is interesting. If the Jaguars keep Bortles on the roster the entire year this season and they release him for next season, they save $19 million against the cap for next season. They wouldn't gain or lose any money this year if they moved on from him. But if they released him at the start of next season, they save $19 million. And $19 million is a lot of money. It's enough money to make a power play for Garoppolo, Carson Palmer, Tyrod Taylor, whoever ends up on the market via free agency. And the sad part is Elway could get that same player for 2/3 of the price if he wanted to, because Denver just has a better culture than Jacksonville.
Well, and the fact that we're closer to being able to be a contender is because we have that solid defense, and really the only question mark is the quarterback, but that's a different story.
Yeah. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles. They only have one draft pick in the first 3 rounds. They traded their second rounder to the Browns in the Carson Wentz deal, and they traded their third rounder to the Bills in the trade last week. So they went Calvin Ridley at 11. And the thing with the Eagles is, you look at their situation for next season. LeGarrette Blount, their starting running back, is going to be a free agent. They cut Ryan Matthews. Jeffrey's on a 1-year prove-it deal. Torrey Smith's a good slot receiver, but that's his ceiling. You don't really have that number 2 target next to him. Nelson Aguilar's not reliable. Left tackle, Jason Peters is in a contract year. Can Lane Johnson avoid suspensions? I mean, this offense is a good supporting cast short term, but next year, there's going to be so many holes if you lose all these guys to free agency that I could actually see the Eagles trading this pick, because they cut their left guard, Alan Barbe, too. So that's Alan Barb as well. So they could actually move down in the draft if they've only got 1 pick in the first 3 rounds, when you consider all the guys they may lose to free agency.
You know, I feel like that'd be the best idea at that point, is to trade down, get as many picks as you can, and really do some solid scouting for players that are going to be available in those rounds 4 through 7.
Because if there's a QB like a Rosen or Lamar Jackson or somebody still on the board, teams are going to want to move up with the Eagles to get that player, and then they can get those picks and recoup.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be the Eagles' best idea, I think, just because at that point in the 3rd round, to me, I mean, I feel like their best option would be just to build that offensive lineup and then help Wentz out with receivers or whatever you got to do. I mean, to me, the defense is fairly okay, but, man, that offense needs a lot of work as far as just helping Wentz.
Yeah, and the Bills, they trade us 2 seconds, or they trade like a first and a third to the Eagles for, and then for the extra picks. The Eagles fans are happy, but EDP goes on a tirade because the Eagles passed on Cortland Sutton. I can see it now.
Oh, I can't wait to see that video when it comes out.
The video where EDP goes off at the Eagles for passing on Cortland Sutton. You got a 6'4", 215-pound motherfucker who can catch the ball and stretch the field. And you pass on him. You trade down. I'm done with you, Philly.
Yeah, he'll keep coming back. He likes the Eagles too much.
He'll also complain if they pass on Barkley in the draft out of Penn State. It's funny. It's good stuff.
I mean, honestly, though, I think that would actually be a good fit, though, having Barkley go to Philadelphia. I mean, I really like that match. I think that his running style would complement Wentz.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he's not the best blocker, but it's a local kid. It's a good fit. Number 12, the Buffalo Bills. I actually like what they did here, sort of mixed things up. They got Lamar Jackson at 12 to replace Tyrod Taylor. Jordan Whitehead out of Pittsburgh at safety. Round 2, they went Dante Pettis with the Rams pick that they got in the Sammy Watkins trade. They went Martez Ivey at guard to replace Richie Incognito, who turns 35. And then they got a guy out of LSU who transferred from Texas Tech to LSU, who's redshirting this year and can technically declare for the 2018 draft. So I like what Buffalo did, getting multiple targets for Lamar Jackson, getting him another offensive lineman on the left side who can complement the 2 offensive tackles at left guard, and then a safety and Whitehead out of Pittsburgh. I really like what the Buffalo Bills did with this draft.
You The Buffalo Bills, I feel like are heading in the right direction, but man, it's still going to take a lot of good scouting and some good hours put in by that front office to really turn that organization around. Personally, if I'm the Bills, I would start to consider drafting a quarterback easily within the first 2 rounds and a very safe quarterback. I mean, to me, that's when I actually would go after Browning or Bakerfield at that point.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson's a high ceiling QB. I feel like he's perfect for Buffalo. But he might not be there when they're picking.
Buffalo. Yeah. See, and I agree. I think Lamar Jackson would be great for that just because he's able to scramble and create plays. He might be able to give the Bills what they need as far as like a jump start, but if you're the Bills, most likely he's not going to be there. So what are you willing to give up to trade up at that point?
You've got 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 2 thirds. So if you want to package those picks to move up for him, that's on the table. So a lot of interesting things with Lamar Jackson.
Chris, I would package that up and actually do that. Would you?
Yeah, I mean, what could end up happening is if the New York Jets do not get the number 1 pick, I almost feel like the Bills are going to try to block them just to keep them from getting Darnold. And then John Lynch is going to take the draft picks and be like, thank you very much, Buffalo. I'll take your 2 firsts, your 2 seconds, your 2 thirds. Now I have 3 first-round picks. Now I have 4 second-round picks. Now I have 4 third-round picks. Thank you very much, Buffalo, for crapping the bed and moving up for Darnold. And with all those picks, with 10 picks in the first 3 rounds, John Lynch can pretty much do whatever the hell he wants at that point.
Yeah, I would say John Lynch, it would be in such a good driving position for the National Football League that he would have the potential to be able to build the 49ers dynasty again.
Like, if he got all those picks from the Bills that they tried to accumulate in the draft just so the Bills could move up for Sam Darnold, John Lynch could literally leave the war room and go to a beach and drink some Corona Light while Kyle Shanahan makes all the picks. Maybe not that.
Yeah.
Wait, you agree? He could just go to a beach? He could make the picks from the beach, but yeah. That's how lucrative.
I mean, we pretty much saw it all last year in this past draft with making picks in space and everything else. You might as well be at the beach with a nice little drink with an umbrella coming out of it.
Yeah. All right. So, Washington Redskins, this is a big winner in my opinion, in Tony's mock. 13, I don't think they'll be picking at 13, but at 13 they get Quentin Nelson, who I think is a Pro Bowl guard in the making. I see Alan Faneca, Mike Munchak when I see his tape. I know that's a little bit of an old school comparison, but that's what I see with Nelson. And then round 2, they get Quinn Blanding, the Virginia Cavaliers safety, who fills a need. So they fill their 2 biggest needs in left guard and safety right off the bat. And then in round 3, they get Alan Lazard. Terrell Pryor's on a 1-year deal. And you look at who Washington loses to free agency. They lose Kirk Cousins to free agency. They lose center Spencer Long, who's a huge asset, to free agency. They lose right tackle Morgan Moses, another asset, to free agency. They lose both of their inside linebackers to free agency. Terrell Pryor's on a 1-year prove-it deal. So if you have to bring back all of those guys, I just let Pryor walk, and then I take somebody like an Alan Lazard in the 3rd round, because Tony Mario has Alan Lazard out of Iowa State going to Washington in the 3rd round, and I think that's a perfect fit for Alan Lazard if they bring back Cousins.
Yeah.
And I can't believe Joe Marino bashed Alan Lazard, and then now he wants people to pay him with a $20 fee for a 1-year access to scouting reports. That is just cheap. And I believe in free trade, free enterprise, so that's why we make the SWAT reports, and they're completely free to the public. We don't charge any money. That's not like us. That shows you have little integrity if you charge money for scouting reports.
Exactly, especially when they're not even worth the money that they're charging. But that's just my opinion as somebody that wouldn't pay for it. But I do agree with you. I think that Lazard would be an awesome fit if Cousins would stay in Washington. I really think that if they could entice Cousins to stay and say, hey, we'll get you any kind of wide receiver that you want, we'll let you be a part of the process, make Cousins happy, because right now, good quarterbacks that can develop quickly are hard to find, let alone quarterbacks that could put up with some of the, I guess you would say, the downright shenanigans that the Washington Redskins put Cousins through. So I really think that now is their time as a front office to really unite and be able to really talk to Cousins and get him to stay and work out a nice contract, maybe keep up with the Giants scoring, the Cowboys scoring, and even Philly.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You keep Cousins, you keep the offensive linemen who are set to be free agents, you draft a guard in the first round, and then you get Lazard later in the draft. I know it's the offensive linemen are not the skill position players that get you fantasy points. They're not the flashy players, but if you do that, you protect Cousins, you keep him long-term, you keep the linemen around him, you build a contender-type team down the road, and then you get a guy like Lazard to replace Pryor. That's the whipped cream on top of the fudge sundae. So, really, and you build the right culture, because you took Dotson in the first round a few years ago, you'll have Crowder on the slot, and then you'll have a big guy like Lazard next to Dotson. And with those weapons, Washington can, and probably will take that next step, Ryan.
You know, I agree, and it comes down to building that offensive line. They may not be the most flashy for getting you fantasy points and everything, but when it downright comes to it, Chris, when I watch game film with Kirk Cousins, I see a great quarterback who does look a lot of, well, not a lot, but very, very hurried in his throws because he doesn't trust that offensive line. I mean, at times they can show flashes of being able to block, but that's usually after they have some rest and everything in between the series. So if you can find that guard in the center to be able to, or not center, the guard and the tackle to be able to really give Cousins time to throw the ball, you're looking at a potential Tom Brady situation. But first things first, give him the weapons, give him protection.
Yep, next up, the New Orleans Saints. They went Sam Hubbard, the Ohio State defensive end, at left end to pair with Cameron Jordan in round 1. They don't have a second rounder. That was traded to the 49ers. And then in round 3, they went Luke Falk as a successor to Breeze. I think that is the best situation for Luke Falk. Of any situations, New Orleans is probably the best overall situation for Luke Falk because his ability to read progressions is very similar to Breeze. But he needs to learn how to play under center. And who better to teach him than Drew Brees?
Exactly. I think that would be ideal for Luke Falk to be able to go in the NFL and learn underneath Drew Brees because, I mean, we've talked about it before, too. He doesn't really have, I think we've still yet to find game film with Luke Falk underneath center taking a snap. So at this point, you're learning from the man that basically can stay cool, calm, and collective underneath every situation at center, which is Drew Brees. So that would be ideal. However, I think the best candidate to take over for Drew Brees would probably be between Browning, if he would still be there, and Bakersfield. And I mean, I know I keep saying their names, but that's because they're good, safe picks that have great mechanics, and I think that would be a better fit. But if Luke Falk ended up there, I think he'd end up really taking it to the next level.
Yeah, and the Saints are going to have a tough decision because they do need that left end next to Cameron Jordan, but they don't have a second-round pick. And to top that off, this is such a top-heavy quarterback draft where if they don't take a QB in the first round, they may miss out if they wait until the third round. So that's the other thing. They were going to take Mahomes at 11, but the Chiefs traded up to get him. So they settled for Lattimore.
Yeah. You know, I feel like the Saints are starting to get in that position to be contenders again, but this is going to take a couple of key pieces, and then just replacing Brees with somebody outside of his era once it comes.
They just need one defensive end unless Trey Hendrickson starts right away and does well. And then they need a quarterback to groom behind Brees, and they're set.
You know, hear me out. I feel like they could also use a left tackle. I mean, obviously their left tackle got hurt this year. Ryan Ramsey, I think, would be a good filler for the next, 1 to 3 years. But then past that, it's kind of shaky. I feel like their offensive line is good, but not great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean because they drafted Andres Pete out of Stanford in the first round, but they kicked him inside to left guard. But when Armstead gets hurt, they can move Pete to left tackle. But they still have a weakness at left guard, unless they start Ryan Ramczyk there, because they have Zach Strife at right tackle currently starting. So they could move Ramczyk to left guard temporarily to get him some experience and then put him back on the bench, let him develop more.
Well, I think if I remember correctly, we had actually talked, and I think I had liked Ramczyk more as the guard versus the tackle because I felt like he got beat too much, and then he didn't have the health that I wanted, whereas I feel like with that guard position, it would be a little bit easier to stay healthy.
That's true. So that's an interesting scenario. Moving on to number 15, the Bengals.
Wait. that maybe the Saints are there, but it's the injury bug that keeps kind of setting them back a step.
Yeah, last year you had Delvin Breaux and P.J. Williams both get injured at cornerback, so their number 1 and number 2 corners were injured. Delvin Breaux missed 6 weeks last year. He's projected to miss 6 to 8 weeks this year as their number 1 corner. P.J. Williams has managed to stay healthy, though, but that's a huge loss because Delvin Breaux was ahead of Lattimore on the depth chart. But so now Lattimore's going to have to come in and be that number 1 corner, be that difference maker right out of the gate. And he was mainly used in the boundary at Ohio State next to Gareon Conley, even though he did make plays. So there is somewhat of an adjustment, even though he did well as a field corner in one-on-one situations with D.D. Westbrook on a few plays last year. So there's some promise there, but it could also backfire because Lattimore had most of his snaps on that left side, so I'm not sure if they want to put him or P.J. Williams there. But that cornerback depth is going to be a little bit thin until Delvin Breaux returns. And then you've got the injuries to Max Unger, Teron Armstead, who they paid a ton of money to. So if all of those guys were healthy, I'd actually pick them to beat the Patriots and even win the NFC South. That's how much I like this team, but the injuries just keep shooting them in the foot. And how patient is Mickey Loomis going to be as GM? How patient is Tom Benson going to be as the owner of this franchise? That really is the big question at the end of the day, Ryan.
Yep, I would agree with you on that one. It comes down to patience as management and everything else to be able to go through, I guess you would say, the growing pains of building a legacy and really, being able to build a dynasty. I mean, ultimately it comes down to, do you have the patience to deal with the rookie mistakes and the sophomore slumps?
Exactly. And moving on to number 15, the Cincinnati Bengals. They went Tarvaris McFadden, the Florida State corner, in the first round. So for the third time in 5 years, or they take a corner in the first round. Darqueze Dennard didn't work out. They took William Jackson III out of Houston to keep the Steelers from getting him in 2016, but he hasn't played yet, and now you get another corner in the first round. So I'm not sure what to think of this. I do like Tarvaris McFadden's tape. He did well versus Mike Williams, but at the same time, 3 cornerbacks in the first round in 5 years. 2 of them haven't translated into starters yet. That's a little bit worrisome, so we'll see. I guess it's trial and error with the corners. They got Chukwuma Okorafor in the second round, who both of us have going to the Bengals at number 4 overall. So I guess if they get Okorafor in round 2, I guess you can't really bash the Bengals for taking a corner in round 1. And then they went Nick Washington, Florida Gators safety with the versatility to play both strong safety and free safety. He's a guy that was on my radar, and I had him anywhere between the 3rd and 4th round on my FanSpeak board. But I had trouble finding tape of Nick Washington. But I watched some tape of him when he filled in for Marquez May last year. He actually looked sort of impressive. So Nick Washington out of Florida. Florida usually has good players in the secondary each year. Washington may be the one guy to keep an eye on, Ryan.
Yeah, I agree with you. Since he's so versatile, he definitely is going to be an interesting player to watch. So I'm very curious to see if he develops into what we all might expect him to become.
All right, next up, the Carolina Panthers at number 16. They went Cortland Sutton here. You gave them Cortland Sutton at 19 in your mock as well. Round 2, they went with Micah Kiser as a successor to Thomas Davis. I have a first-round grade on Micah Kiser. With Micah Kiser, he had 100 tackles, something that Malik Jefferson and Cameron Smith did not do despite being underclassmen. It's not just that. He's great at pressuring the quarterback. He can stop the run, and he's able to hold his own in zone coverage versus David Njoku. So if you're a linebacker and you're able to hold your own in coverage versus a tight end like David Njoku, that's something that really does make you a special prospect. But Tony has him playing the weak side, succeeding Thomas Davis. I honestly feel like he could play middle linebacker. If Luke Kuechly got injured again, he could just move over to middle linebacker until Kuechly recovered. But he's versatile enough to play linebacker in any of those 3 spots with his speed and agility. So he's an interesting pick for Carolina in round 2. And then round 3, they went cornerback Perry Nickerson out of Tulane, who I also have a round 3 grade on. And I gotta say, Perry Nickerson out of Tulane really impressed me. I went back and watched his tape versus Memphis Riley Ferguson started that game 1 for 8, even though I did have a third-round grade on Riley Ferguson. It's not that Ferguson wasn't making the bad reads. I mean, Perry Nickerson, his press coverage needs to improve, but he is money in man and zone coverage. Like, he'll deceive quarterbacks into thinking his press coverage is crappy. Then he'll use his speed to lock down a receiver through man, or he'll drop back using his hips into zone coverage, and then he'll make the big play. And that's what you want to see from your cornerback. You want a cornerback that makes you think the quarterback has won, has made the right read, and then he just comes up like a pop-up ad or a jack-in-the-box and makes the breakup, makes the big play, makes the interception. So there's a lot to like with Perry Nickerson, but the problem is he's only 5'10", 180, 190, so there might be a limited ceiling. But he can play all 3 cornerback spots.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's kind of a little bit of a limited ceiling, but I mean, if you can play all 3 positions, why not? I mean, we've seen other players be able to translate and have some good success before him, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the Panthers took a guy named Josh Norman out of Coastal Carolina, so I have no problem with Perry Nickerson out of Tulane, because he's basically, think Josh Norman with Desmond King's size. That's sort of what I see with Perry Nickerson. At 5'10".
I would agree with that.
All right, next up, the Indianapolis Colts. They go defense, tight end. They went Jair Alexander at 17, who I have a top 10 grade on. They went Benigbo Okwara, the Oklahoma edge rusher. It's hard to pronounce his name, Okoron Kwan. And then they went Cam Sirigne as a number 2 tight end next to Jack Doyle. And Tony pointed out how if the Colts release Jack Doyle because he struggles at tight end, they don't lose any cap space. And even if Doyle impresses, they can bring Sirigne in to complement him the same way Tampa Bay brought in O.J. Howard to complement their current starter, Cameron Brate. So they would get Sirigne to complement Jack Doyle in Indianapolis. Any thoughts on that pick? I mean, it's not a flashy pick, but this might be a good fit for Cam Sirigne out of Wake Forest. Because I know you did the write-up, and you came away really impressed with him, even more impressed than I was.
You know, I would really like them to go to the Colts, too. I mean, I feel like that'd be a nice little match.
Yeah, Lux had a lot of success when he had 2 tight ends. When he lost Kobe Fleener, sort of started to take a bit of a step back because he didn't have as much weapons to work with. But Minnesota Vikings are on the clock here at 18. They went James Washington round 1. Jamarco Jones is a guard in round 2. They'll kick him inside to tackle once the contract situations with Riley Reiff and Mike Remmers settle down a little bit, because I still like Reiff as a right tackle, but I don't like Remmers at all as a starter. But the problem is both are locked up on Minnesota's roster until 2019, and if they release either guy early, they lose cap space. So the Vikings are basically stuck with 2 mediocre tackles for the next 2 seasons, which really doesn't bode well for them, but they could start Jamarco Jones at guard and kick him over to tackle eventually. And then in round 3, they went Jared Stidham out of Auburn, the sophomore redshirt quarterback that was a 5-star recruit in high school. If they bring back Bradford or Bridgewater and they take Stidham as a developmental backup, I actually like that fit, but if they throw him into the fire right away, then it's going to be a disaster. But if they take him as a project quarterback, that could be a really solid pick that ends up working out down the road.
Honestly, if I was the Vikings, if I wanted a pick that I wanted to develop that might still be there in the later round, would be Mason Rudolph, just because he's projected to go anywhere from 1st to 3rd.
Yeah, and speaking of Mason Rudolph, James Washington's Oklahoma State teammate, he's the next pick in on this mock draft. So in Tony's mock, James Washington, the Oklahoma State receiver, went ahead of Mason Rudolph. And Arizona's a good fit for Mason Rudolph. Can't really fault that. Then they went Dorrance Armstrong Jr., the Kansas edge rusher, that I remember you watching the tape, and you were like, you're not that impressed with Dorrance Armstrong Jr., because it was him and Jalen Ferguson out of Louisiana Tech. There was something, they both had great numbers, but there was something about their tape that you didn't really like at the time, back in June or July. Maybe we'll reassess those guys down the road, because they are sophomore red shirts and stuff, but there was something I remember you telling me through a Facebook message. There's something you didn't like about those 2 players. But Arizona would be taking Armstrong for depth, and then they went Jake Weinecke, who I have them taking in the second round in round 3. So put Weinecke next to Larry Fitzgerald, and you get Mason Rudolph to develop behind Carson Palmer. Those are 2 good future players for your offense, and Weinecke could probably have an instant impact in this offense, and you draft for the future, you get the best players on the board, you put yourself in a great position to win. I just wish Arizona would have gotten a corner to put next to Peterson, but they can get Maurice Claiborne in free agency because Claiborne's on a 1-year prove-it deal with the Jets. And number 2, Maurice Claiborne played next to Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu at LSU. So the fact that the Cardinals didn't make him an offer in free agency sort of appalls me because he'd be perfect with those guys.
Yeah, I would agree to a point.
Next up, the Baltimore Ravens. And Drake from Lombardi's Draft Talk, I forget his last name, Drake Holiday, I think it is. Completely unrelated to Doc Holliday, the Marshall Thundering Herd head coach. But Drake Holiday loves Darius Geist to the point where he'd take him in the top 10 if the Ravens were picking in the top 10. In this scenario, Geist falls to 21 in Tony's mock. The Ravens make the playoffs at 8-8 or 9-7. The Ravens go 9-7 along with the Colts, but since the Ravens beat the Colts in Tony's season preview or whatever, the Ravens get in as the final wild card on that technicality. So the Ravens go 9-7. They get a wild card, and they get Geist in the first round. They get Mason Cole in the second, and then they get Deontay Burnett in the third round. Now, Deontay Burnett's not a guy who's on our fan speak board, but Tony brought him up, and USC had 2 really good receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster and Darius Rogers. Now Deontay Burnett comes in. He's going to be the number 1 wideout after being a slot receiver at 6 foot, 180 pounds. And I have to think Deontay Burnett, he basically tells Darnold to get him the damn ball like Keyshawn Johnson, and Darnold goes, look, I'll get you the ball. Just take it easy. You're not Keyshawn Johnson. Just go out there, make the big play, have some fun, keep being a team guy, talking about how great our receivers are, and we'll mix things up. So, yeah. But he's, like, they've said that Burnett could be a riser, though. That's the thing. He's an underclassman this year. He was a slot receiver last year. Every year you got these riser receivers who don't really do jack squat in their first 2 years, but they just tear it up in their third season. John Ross missed his second year due to a season-ending injury, and then he just tore it up last season and rose up the board. So Burnett might be a riser. If Sam Darnold dominates this year, Deontay Burnett's a guy that people will say, look, this guy helped Darnold out a lot. He's a riser. This stuff happens every year in the draft with risers, and Burnett might be a riser because this is a riser that we really didn't identify when going through our fan speak board pick by pick because I was more focused on the seniors more so than the underclassmen. So I'll give Tony some credit here for identifying a potential riser.
Absolutely.
You like this Ravens draft with Geist, Mason Cole, the top center, and Burnett at wide receiver in round 3?
I like the Mason Cole idea. I feel like there's better running backs available besides Geist. I think if you wait until the later rounds, you'd be able to find somebody. I feel like running backs can be found in just about any round, particular 2 through 4, though. So, I mean, I feel like that might be a little bit too early. I think that if I was the Ravens, though, I would almost just take a receiver or maybe even go after a tight end.
I would take Geist in that situation only because I think Geist has the tools to be a Pro Bowl running back. I don't think he's a blue-chip guy, but I think he's the best running back with the highest ceiling, and he pass protected well versus Myles Garrett. So if he was there, I'd actually consider him with Danny Woodhead's injury history, with Kenneth Dixon on IR. He got suspended for the first 4 games, but now he's on IR, so it's like, I don't know if the suspension's going to go into effect next year. I just don't trust Kenneth Dixon at this point, so I'd actually be open to taking Geist if he fell. If Geist or Barkley fell, I'm okay with taking a running back in the first round, but otherwise, I would wait it out because there's so many other running backs in this class. So if you miss out on Geist or Barkley, you wait for running back.
I feel like if I was going to pick one of those 2, I feel like Barkley would make the better fitting for Baltimore.
Terrible in pass protection, but he compensates for it like LaDainian Tomlinson. So maybe that would be a good fit. Baltimore is a run-first team, though, so they wouldn't need their running back to use pass protection because they're a run-first offense. Now, a team like a New England or a Pittsburgh or any team like a Green Bay, they need running backs that can pass protect. But the Ravens, they're built to run the football, so they might not need a pass-blocking running back as much as some of the other teams.
Well, honestly, though, I mean, maybe they do just because Flacco is getting a little bit older, and you want to make sure that you don't have him take any hard hits that might affect his health. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a valid point as well. Tennessee Titans were at number 22. Minka Fitzpatrick, Alabama corner. Minka Fitzpatrick can play cornerback or free safety. He's that versatile. And even though I have a second-round grade on Minka Fitzpatrick, I really like this pick for the Titans because I'm not sold on Logan Ryan as the number one corner. He was a great number two corner, but he's getting number one corner money. You get Adoree Jackson, who I see as a nickel corner at best, even though I think he can be a beast on special teams. And then you get Minka Fitzpatrick, who can play corner. He's an upgrade over Jackson as far as immediate impact goes. And you can also kick him inside to safety, so you can keep your starting corners in Ryan and Jackson, and you can kick him inside to safety too. So, I mean, that's a great fit for the Titans. And they went Vita Vea, the nose tackle out of Washington in round 2. And then in round 3, the Titans went with Kendall Joseph, the Clemson inside linebacker, who had a quarterback hurry in the ACC championship on Wyatt Teller that caused Gerard Evans to throw the interception that won Clemson the ACC title. So Kendall Joseph actually has some pass rushing ability as well. Somebody we underestimated when initially watching his tape. He's a guy we're probably going to have to go back and watch a little more tape on at some point later down the road. So, and Chris Robbins is doing like these Lombardi's Draft Talk film sessions at like 3 a.m. to the point where it's inspiring me to pull an all-nighter. So keep up the amazing work, Chris, and this is keeping me from going to bed early, which is good because I like to be up late so I can focus on writing code or promoting articles or whatever. So, yeah, that's awesome. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys, who I thought aced this draft. Harold Landry at 23. You pair Harold Landry with Taco Charlton. I know this year you're going to have Tyrone Crawford and DeMarcus Lawrence starting at defensive end, but there's a buyout option in Crawford's contract where you can buy him out, save $1 million this year, over $6 million next year. Lawrence is a free agent after this season, so I feel like if Lawrence does not take off as a sack artist by week 6, where he's at 4 or 5 sacks by week 6, I feel like Dallas is going to make a decision to use Taco Charlton as a situational pass rusher at that point. I still think he'll be a situational pass rusher behind Tyrone Crawford because Crawford's a run stuffer. He's not a pass rusher. He's never had more than 5 sacks. So I feel like in third down situations, they'll put Charlton in for Crawford and at the right end spot. And if he doesn't get anything going, they'll wait until next year to start him at left end. And then they can get Harold Landry. They can start him at right end and put Charlton at left end. And that's a deadly combination. And then you get Trent Thompson, a defensive tackle out of Georgia in round 2. And then a safety in round 3. The safety the Dallas Cowboys took is Marcus Allen, the Penn State safety that Joey loves, who we did a prospect profile on over at the Evolution Network. So that's actually a really strong draft for the Dallas Cowboys. I'll give it an A grade. I don't love a very good draft by the Dallas Cowboys.
You know, I agree. I think now that they found like a quarterback that's not going to be injury prone, they're definitely past that rebuilding phase. I feel like they got a lot of the arguments out of the way. I feel like Jerry Jones is willing to put the money into his players as well and make them happy. So I feel like ultimately, long term, this defense especially is looking like a very high playoff caliber defense.
Yeah, interesting. Number 24, the New York Giants. Toby Weathersby went to the Giants in this mock draft. I don't know how I feel about that now because initially I had a first to second round grade on him. But I found out Weathersby only has 4 career starts in his first 2 seasons at LSU. So I moved him down from the 1st round to the 4th round because of that. Because I think that's sort of a big deal, Ryan. You know, like if he only has 4 career starts in 2 seasons, that's a little bit alarming. I mean, even though he was a 1st round pick in a lot of mock drafts for 2018, 4 career starts in 2 seasons is very, very concerning.
Yeah, that's really concerning, actually, for career starts in 2 seasons. I mean, what was holding him back from actually starting, or what was holding him back from even trying to be able to compete for that starting job, I guess is what I'm saying. Wow, what was he doing?
The scary thing is he was actually a top 5 pick at one point, at this point in 2016, 2 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, and he only has 4 career starts now.
You know, Chris, I gotta say this. I think I do agree with your move to Lodo move in from 1st to 4th just because of that red flag right there.
I think a lot of scouts didn't pick up on that, and I was looking at the LSU roster. I was like, I'm about to do my Toby Weathersby SWAT report. Let's see what we can look up. And I was like, wow, 4 career starts. Holy crap. Yeah, I got to move him down. So, yeah, that's why I moved Weathersby down. Jalen Ferguson out of Louisiana Tech, another guy that you weren't high on but had 14.5 sacks, 16.5 tackles for a loss. Goes to the Giants as a weak side linebacker. They're hoping to get a Lawrence Taylor type of player. Probably won't get that. And then round 3, the Giants got Heath Harding for depth. I really like Heath Harding. I think he can be a solid nickel corner, but in this situation, he goes to the Giants as a depth player, and he can learn for a year or 2, maybe become a solid starting cornerback. So, not a bad pick. Probably their best pick of those 3, Heath Harding in round 3. I'd give this Giants draft a C grade. I just don't know what to think of it.
Yeah, I would say that works. It's like a C+. I mean, it's not really anything that stands out in particular, but it's not necessarily the worst draft either.
All right, interestingly enough, we move on to the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons have Jake Matthews at left tackle and Ryan Schrader at right tackle. But they took Orlando Brown as a guard here. And Hugh Thornton, their starting right guard, retired. And their starting left guard, Andy Levitre, they can save $7 million against the cap if they release Levitre, who's 32 years old after this season. So Tony gave them Orlando Brown as a guard. He thinks at 6'8", 345. Teams won't want him as a tackle. Orlando Brown, the Oklahoma kid that you did a profile up on, and you can go to draftutopia.com/Facebook to read Ryan Romero's write-up on Orlando Brown. And then round 2, Atlanta went with Dalen Mack to replace Dontari Poe. Because remember, Poe's on a 1-year prove-it deal. Then round 3, Andrew Wingard, Wyoming Cowboys free safety. We had Marcus Epps or something, the Wyoming strong safety on our fan speak board, but we did not have Andrew Wingard, the free safety, on our board. So Wingard's another guy besides Deontay Burnett that we really need to watch and study. I mean, even after our hard work and research with these 400 prospects, there's still guys that we sort of missed on in terms of evaluations. Underclassmen, sophomore redshirts, guys we weren't sure, are they going to declare or are they going to go back to school? So everything is just a mirage and a smokescreen at this point. But free safety, Dalen Mack, Orlando Brown, I like this draft for the Falcons. I'll give it an A grade.
I was going to say, I actually really like that draft, mostly because of Brown, and I feel like you would be able to really give Matt Ryan some good protection.
I mean, they've already got 2 starting offensive tackles, so Atlanta's one of the few teams that has the luxury to kick him inside the guard, and they make their offensive line even stronger in that situation. You know?
Very true.
And they might even keep Levitre and put him at right guard. Who knows? Either way, it's a great pick.
You know, at this point, I agree. I think that they just need to build the line because, I mean, I feel like their defense is pretty good. I mean, granted, a lot of them are pretty young, though. I mean, you got rookies through, 3rd and 4th season, so their defense is definitely there. Now it's just a matter of continuing to give the supporting cast of Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, what they need.
Yeah, because the offensive tackles both did well during the Super Bowl at first. But after Alex Mack got injured, the interior offensive line began to crumble. It was mainly the right guard and the backup center for Mac that was giving up the sacks to the Patriots. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. But the Chiefs, Deebo Samuel, South Carolina receiver, and then Matthew Thomas as an inside linebacker out of Florida State. Deebo Samuel's not a guy I'm as high on, but he has speed. He can play special teams. He's a guy who might get some more exposure. And Matthew Thomas, I can live with this pick too because Derek Johnson got a season-ending injury last year. Chiefs didn't find someone to develop in the later rounds of the draft. And Ramik Wilson, he's got to get to 100 tackles. He's got to take that next step and elevate his game. Everybody loved Ramik Wilson coming out of Georgia. He finally won the starting job in his second season, but he's got to take that next step in year 3 because if he doesn't and Derek Johnson gets injured again, teams will be able to run the ball up on the Chiefs because they don't have Dontari Poe. They have Benny Logan, who's solid, but he's still a downgrade over Poe. So I feel like if Derek Johnson does not stay healthy or Ramik Wilson does not take that next step, Kansas City could be in the market for a linebacker in the 3rd round. Yeah, I buy that. So this is a solid draft. I'll give it a B grade because they address need. I just think they could have gotten 2 different players that would have filled those needs better. But I don't hate this draft because they took care of some needs.
Yeah. You know, I don't hate it, don't disagree with it.
Ooh, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is another good draft. All right. Bradley Chubb, North Carolina State pass rusher, who got triple teams. Like, he actually commanded triple teams. Buccaneers get him at 27. They get, round 2, they get Kareem Orr, the Arizona State corner that transferred to Chattanooga. Can play everywhere on the secondary. In round 3, Cole Madison out of Washington State. I really like this draft for Tampa Bay. I'm going to go out on a limb and actually give this an A-plus grade because I just love the selections and the value they're getting here because I have a 2nd-round grade on Cole Madison. You have a 1st-round grade on him. I think we both identified him as a riser, so you get Bradley Chubb, a guy who commands triple teams in round 1. You get Kareem Orr, a guy who plays anywhere on the secondary in round 2, and then Cole Madison in round 3. This is a fantastic draft for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
You know, and the scary thing, though, too, is they're only going to keep getting better after this year. I mean, I really think that, I know that over the past, 3 to 5 seasons, everyone said, oh, Tampa Bay, this is going to be their year, this is going to be their breakout year, etc. But, I mean, let's face it, I mean, obviously they fell short of expectations, but this year and next year with what they have and everything on paper is looking according, I mean, really, it's the sky's the limit right now for the Tampa Bay team.
Yep, next up, the Oakland Raiders. Malik Jefferson at 28. I love that pick. They need a middle linebacker, but then they want corner in 2nd round, which I don't think they need to do with all the corners they have on their roster, like TJ Carey. I know Carey's got an expiring contract. I know Sean Smith's done some, he was involved in a protest or something off the field. I don't know what it was. I don't have the specifics on that. Breon Borders, their undrafted corner out of Duke's, actually playing well enough to earn a starting spot. Conley was on the PUP list for a while, so I don't think Oakland needs a corner, but if everything keeps going downhill with their corners, they might take one in the 2nd round. And then CeCe Jefferson, I can relate to that pick as a defensive end because they did draft Mario Edwards Jr. in the 2nd round at Florida State in 2015. He hasn't worked out as that guy across from Khalil Mack. They got Shalik Calhoun and Jihad Ward in 2016. Neither one of them has worked out as that defensive end next to Khalil Mack, and that's something the Raiders have wanted to solidify for the last 2-3 years. They still haven't in the 3rd round in 2018, so I can agree with that. I'll give it a B-plus grade. I think it's a solid draft for the most part.
All right.
Any thoughts on the Raiders before we get to Seattle?
You know, I feel like it's a fairly good draft. As you know, I had Malik Jefferson ranked pretty high in my draft. I feel like he is one of those special linebackers that's going to be pretty good here in the next 3-4 years. I think we're going to be seeing his name a lot in the TV room as well. So overall, though, I think the Raiders are in the right position. I mean, obviously their offense seems pretty set. There's a couple question marks on defense, but at this point, I think it's just coming down to the team chemistry and then also, you know, player morale. I mean, you have a transition happening from possibly going from Oakland to Las Vegas, and, you know, your owner seems to be more interested in that versus the actual team itself.
Yep, and that brings us to number 29, the NFC Championship runner-up, the Seattle Seahawks. They finally lose a NFC title game to Aaron Rodgers. Yes, we had to do that. Joe Buck, his man crush, Aaron Rodgers. And it's like, the Packers lost to Seattle in overtime in that NFC title game a few years ago in Seattle. So if they lost in Green Bay, Joe Buck would be ecstatic.
Oh my goodness. Joe Buck would sit there and just have himself a heyday if Green Bay ended up winning against Seattle.
Yeah, so what Seattle did is Archie Lewis round 1 as a left tackle. Love that pick. Then they went Jester Weah, the Pittsburgh receiver that you really liked on tape in round 2. He could be a riser this year. And round 3, Jordan Jones, the Kentucky middle linebacker that we hated on tape. The reasoning here is Seattle loses 2 backup middle linebackers to free agency, and they can get him as a backup to Bobby Wagner. He would not start in this situation. He'd be a backup. And Jordan Jones in round 3, I think it's a little bit of a reach, but it's not a terrible pick if they're drafting him to mainly be a backup. Because remember, we had Jordan Jones in our first round at one point, and then you watched his tape, and it's like, really? He's in a first rounder? Come on, Ransom, you're better than that. That's basically what you were telling me after we watched the Kentucky linebacker.
Yeah, I remember that a little bit more now. I remember I was pretty disappointed with your draft rankings there for a little while.
Yeah, so him in the 3rd round as a backup isn't really a bad pick, but it's also still a reach.
I agree.
But overall, I like this draft for Seattle. I'm going to give it a B grade. Pittsburgh Steelers at number 30. They went Cameron Smith at 30, which I think is a steal, just like with Watt. If they got Cameron Smith that late in the draft, I think they would instantly become the favorite to win the AFC. But they might prefer Malik Jefferson because Cameron Smith's going to get suspended for the first half against Western Michigan. It's not a full game suspension, but the Steelers are huge on character. I think that's the biggest reason they shied away from Reuben Foster. Then round 2, they got Will Clapp, the LSU center, my number 2 center in the draft. And Maurkice Pouncey has not been listed on the Steelers depth chart. He was on the PUP list prior to training camp, so if Pouncey's on the PUP list, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of the Steelers drafting a center like Will Clapp to groom behind him, because Will Clapp can play both guard spots as well as center. I mean, he could start right away over Ramon Foster, or they could groom him to replace Pouncey. They did get B.J. Finney out of Kansas State, too, who I really liked heading into the 2016 NFL draft as one of the better centers in the league. And they got him as a backup to Pouncey, too. So I actually think B.J. Finney can come in and be a solid starter for a few games if Pouncey does miss some time. Because I think he's solid as a backup. He's not a starting center, but Will Clapp is going to be a starter in this league. I don't know if he's going to be a pure center or a guard. There's a lot of guards who are moving to center this year, too, not just Mason Cole. And then round 3, they went Andrew Brown, 6'4", 285-pound defensive end to replace Stephon Tuitt, who's in a contract year. Plus, there's some people that have first-round grades on Andrew Brown, even though we didn't really come away impressed with his tape. So him in round 3 as a starter in a 5-technique role, I actually like that fit. So I'm going to give the Steeler draft an A+ grade because I do like a lot of the picks and fits here.
I'll give it an A-.
All right, that averages out to an A. The Green Bay Packers, we've got 2 teams left. Marcel Frazier as an edge rusher at outside linebacker at 31. At 63, they went with Martinez Rankin, the Mississippi State left tackle, who you thought was placed way too high in a lot of mock drafts. But the thing is, Martinez Rankin took snaps under center this year. Like, he actually lined up at center in the spring. And the Packers need a center more than they need a left tackle. So I could see the Packers taking him as a center. It's not a terrible pick if they move him to center. I mean, it's a reach, but it's not a terrible pick if they put him at center, because it's like maybe he'll do better there. And then round 3, the Packers got a nose tackle in Derek Nunati, the Florida State defensive tackle, 6'1", 313-pound defensive tackle. And he's going to face Bradley Bozeman out of Alabama in Week 1, the Alabama center. So that's going to be a fun matchup. And we'll talk about that a little bit in depth on September 1st when we have the first college show, which will be a fun show. And then that'll be a 2 p.m. show with Tracy and Thomas. So we'll talk about some college football games for Week 1 and some college predictions for the playoff and stuff. And then you've got the New England Patriots. They went Armani Watts at safety. They went Ike Bodiger at guard, because Bodiger can play tackle or guard on both sides. And then Jack Sitchie. He did miss the season with an injury, but he's versatile to play all 3 linebacker spots. And Jack Sitchie actually had 3 sacks, a hat trick of sacks, in Wisconsin's bowl game over Cody Kessler in USC. Kessler holds on to the ball too long. He still hasn't corrected that. That's why he got demoted from 1st string to 3rd string. So, yeah, that's another issue with his tape. And Jack Sitchie was able to break out like that. So, he clearly has the talent to be that guy. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on these Patriots and Packers drafts? They both look like solid B-grade drafts, and both good drafts to wrap up round 1 here.
I agree with you to a point, but I feel like Patriots could have done better.
Yeah, I got Bodger I'm going to put Bodger at 65. I'm going to move him down to round 3. I do like him. There's just other offensive tackles I like better. Cole Madison's a player who moved up ahead of him. Trey Adams moved ahead of him. Orlando Brown moved ahead of him. There's so many guys that moved ahead of him that he sort of dipped to round 3, and there are some durability concerns because he only has 1 full season under belt as a starter, and he got placed on injured reserve in 2015. And then Jack Sitchie got placed on injured reserve this year. So 2 of those 3 picks could be guys with durability issues, even though I love the Armani Watts selection because he's not Devin McCourty, but he could be another Devin McCourty if you groom him behind McCourty, because McCourty's 31. So I love the Armani Watts pick, Ryan, but the other 2 picks could be boom or bust picks, the day 2 picks.
I do like Armani Watts pick, but that's about it.
So you like the Armani pick, but you're not a fan of Bodger. Bodger's good. He's a borderline starter.
I'm in between. I'm not quite sold, but not necessarily against him either. I feel like you'd be able to get him in, round 3.
Yeah, same here. And like I've been stating, and then Jack Sitchie, I don't have him in the first 3 rounds of my mock, but at the same time, he has great tape. I feel like he is a guy I should move up on my board, but I'm probably going to wait until I do my linebacker rankings to move him up on the board. So after doing SWOT reports, I'd say I've evaluated 90 of the 400 players on our FanSpeak board in depth, and I'll evaluate other players as they move up the boards and stuff, because there's still a lot of college football. There's going to be underclassmen that declare for the draft. There's going to be players that accept Senior Bowl invites, and when those players get mentioned, that's when we'll do scouting reports on them, because this is just a very preliminary phase. We're not in the actual draft season phase until we know who's going to be at the Senior Bowl and we know what underclassmen are drafting. This is just all speculation. From this point until January, everything draft related is just speculation until the logistics of who's going where ends up sort of being played out. But we get to watch college football games, we get to scout some of these guys, and we get to have fun with it too. So there's a lot to be excited about with college returning next month and with the NFL next month. Plus, next week, we'll have another NFL draft show where we're going to help Joey make a mock draft from scratch. We don't have to break down all of Tony's picks in depth, but we'll mention some of the picks Mark made, you made, I made, to help Joey get a draft order set out. So basically, we're going to help Joey get a draft order for Draft Evolution set up next week and talk about some other fun topics, maybe if we positions, because I think we'll have that window of opportunity next week. And by that point, all of my SWOT reports for the offensive football players will be up. And then when the season starts in September, we have the defensive players to look forward to scouting. So with defense, it'll be a week-by-week basis where we'll have to constantly update things weekly. Because this is what I'm good at. I'm good with the offensive ranking updates, but not so much with the defensive rankings. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to another edition of Draft Utopia. Next week, we'll be back with our first NFL draft special. And enjoy. We'll worry about other drafts as we get closer to the 2018 soccer, hockey, basketball draft. We'll worry about that stuff later. Right now, we're just going to focus on NFL because that's the bread and butter. That's the big cheese. That's what people love. And we'll have our first NFL draft special, our pre-draft show, next Sunday. So long, and enjoy your Sunday afternoons. Goodbye.
Call recording has been completed.
So long from the Utopia Sports. We'll be uploading this video to YouTube. Subscribe, like our channel on YouTube, and any words of wisdom before the Utopia Sports uploads this episode to YouTube?
Not really. I mean, except for better start to rep your team right now. Football season's right around the corner, and you don't want to be called a bandwagon fan.
Vampire fan?
And as always.
What's that?
Huh?
Is it like a bandwagon fan?
Yeah, I just said bandwagon fan.
Yeah, okay. You said bandwagon fan, and I thought vampires. Good thing that wasn't mentioned on Talkshoe, but it will be mentioned on YouTube as a blooper, I guess, which is sort of cool. So this episode was 2 hours and 42 minutes.